Shoot something. Oh, okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody, to the May 12th, 2025 regular city council meeting. Item 2 is the roll call of the council. I'd like to ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilor Ring,
Present.
Councilor McLaughlin,
Present.
Councilor Runyon,
present.
Councilor Randall,
Present.
Councilor Richardson,
Present.
Mayor Mays.
Present. Let the record show we have 2 council members on Zoom, Councilor Randall and Councilor Runyon. Okay, item 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask our council president, Tim McLaughlin, to please lead us in the pledge.
Would you please stand and remove your hat? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
McLaughlin will second.
Moved by Councilor Richardson and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion?
I have one question, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull something from the consent agenda for a very brief discussion. Is that appropriate now or after we vote on?
Would probably have been either way, so go ahead and do it now.
Is it a motion or just a request?
Just a request.
I'd like to request that we remove item E to immediately after the consent agenda for a short discussion.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
We may need a second.
It's been moved by Counselor Ring and seconded by Counselor Richardson to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any more discussion?
Mayor Mays,
Yes.
I believe I heard Councilor Richardson say he wanted to move this item to immediately after the approval of the consent agenda.
Correct.
Thought our rules say it would be at the end of the meeting.
I think
It's fine.
I think it will be at the end of the meeting. I just wanted to clarify that. I'm double checking right now. If you just give me half.
That's okay. We'll just make it at the end of the meeting. How's
Do
that? All right. Okay, did we vote on that?
No, not yet.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 5 is audience participation during this portion of the meeting. Anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 3 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the city council for up to 3 minutes on an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, we'll move ahead. City manager's report, number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it real short this evening, but I want to take a moment to introduce everyone to Brenda Fahey, who I believe is in the third row there. Brenda is joining us from the city of Portland and is now the new Assistant City Manager, HR Director for the city of the Dalles. This is her very first day for a nice packed city council meeting. So thank you all for being here for Brenda, I'm sure. I'm really excited to have Brenda join our team. We've evolved this position here. I'm really excited as to what she brings to the table, her experience and resources, and I'm glad to see her start. I also wanted to give a special thank you and acknowledgement to the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce for the Cherry Festival that was put on a couple weeks ago. My kids personally had a great time down there, and I think that event was well done again. And I also wanted to give you a special reminder that there is a city council meeting scheduled for June 2nd. This is a special meeting. As you know, the May 26th is a holiday, so that regular city council meeting has been canceled, and we'll have a special meeting on June 2nd, followed by a regular city council meeting on June 9th. So kind of back to back coming up, and just wanted to make sure that was on your calendar. Other than that, that's my report.
Thank you. Item 7 is city council reports. We'll start up there on Zoom with Councilor Runyon.
I am in Ontario, California with a group called Run for the Wall, riding with the group to Washington, D.C., supporting veterans and veterans' medical issues and other items at memorials and VA hospitals and high schools across the country. And I will be on Zoom at that next meeting as well on my way back from D.C. to Oregon.
Stay safe, Counselor. That's a good cause you're riding your motorcycle for. Counselor Randall. Sam. Counselor Randall is apparently not available, so we'll move on to Counselor Richardson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll pass and report next meeting, if that's all right.
Counselor Ring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, I attended the City Budget Committee meeting, and prior to that, Thursday during the day, I attended the Oregon Ethics Commission public meeting law training.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Well, I have a airport meeting this Friday, May 16th at 7:30 a.m. Budget renewal meeting on May 5th, and we reviewed the urban budget and recommended to move that forward for review by City Council. I also was chair of the city budget. That happened last 5th, let's see, must have been 5th and 6th. So that was recent. And in the Cherry Festival, I rode with Councilor Scott Randall, and we violated the rules and threw candy out the window. So I'll admit it. All right, that's my report for this week.
In the interest of time, I'll forego my report except to remind Counselor McLaughlin that I was also with you in the
Well,
parade.
you were in the car ahead of us and you were throwing candy so it would come back to us.
Mayor
Okay.
May, can you hear me?
Yes,
I should have mentioned one other thing. I told our city clerk that due to time constraints where I'm located at, I will have to exit the meeting at 6:30. And my point is, I would like the council to tell me, and possibly Jonathan Kara, if I were to give my vote to Councilor Ring regarding the item pulled from the agenda, is that appropriate or not possible if I'm not connected to the meeting?
Mr. Mayor?
yeah.
That's a great question, Councilor Runyon. No, it's not possible. We don't recognize proxy votes or absentee votes or any other kind of vote other than votes by individual councilors after motions have been made.
All right. Well, okay. Ben knows my thoughts anyway. All
Okay,
right. Thank you.
To clarify, you're talking about the item that was pulled from the consent agenda, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately, which has already been done. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we have 4 remaining items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of the April 28th City Council meeting minutes. Second is the approval of the April 21st special City Council meeting minutes. Third is a resolution assessing real property for the cost of nuisance abatement on 7th Street, West 7th Street. Fourth is approving surplus equipment in the Public Works Department and vehicles. And finally, authorizing a personal services agreement with Advanced Electrical Technologies for our water treatment plant SCADA upgrades. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as previously amended.
I'll second.
Been moved by Councilor Ring and seconded by Councilor Richardson to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I am on C, the property. I didn't look into that to find out, are the persons involved with this, are they here tonight?
Is the property owner located at
It would be
32
323 West 7th.
3323
West
West
7th
7th
Street?
Street.
Are they here tonight?
All right, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, items 9A, right?
We had a discussion. Did we vote on that one? On the consent?
Consent agenda.
That's going to be later. We pulled an
now-
item.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye. Now we have.
Okay, let the record show Council Randall is back with us. Okay, we're back to 9A. I have a 4-page recital here, so bear with me. Now is the time specified for the City Council to conduct a quasi-judicial public hearing to consider the following matter. Appeal application number 39-25, an appeal of Planning Commission Resolution number PC 627-25A, a resolution denying appeal application number 38-25, an appeal of the Community Development Director's March 21st, 2025 approval of subdivision application number 86-24, Jason Alford, for the siting and development of a 2-phase, single-family residential subdivision. This hearing requires the City Council to make its decision based exclusively on the applicable criteria, the evidence in the record, and specific findings. The substantive criteria on which the Council will base its decision in this matter are found in the staff report. Anyone who wishes to testify must be recognized by me before testifying. When I recognize you, please proceed to the microphone and state your name and mailing address for the record. The hearing is also required to be recorded. Generally, the public hearing procedure will go as follows. 1, counselors may ask questions of any person immediately following their testimony. After the public testimony portion of the hearing, after it closes, counselors may ask questions of any person as part of the city council's deliberations toward a decision. I may exclude or limit cumulative, repetitious, or immaterial testimony consistent with the city council rules. So everyone is encouraged to please be brief and not repetitious, except for the applicant, the appellant, and the time limits that I'm going to describe right now. We will begin with a staff report for up to 20 minutes. After the staff report, we will hear from the applicant for up to 20 minutes. After the applicant, we will hear from the appellant for up to 20 minutes. Next, I will ask for testimony from any proponents of the appeal for up to 3 minutes apiece. Then I will ask for testimony from any opponents of the appeal for up to 3 minutes. Next, I will ask for testimony from anyone else who wishes to offer relevant testimony or ask relevant questions for up to 3 minutes. Then the city council will have an opportunity to ask the staff any additional questions. After those questions are answered, the appellant and the applicant will have an opportunity for any rebuttals. After those rebuttals, the appellant and then the applicant will have an opportunity to close their testimony. Finally, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing, and the city council will deliberate toward a decision. During the hearing, some important standards apply. First, if you testify, please direct your testimony, arguments, and evidence to the applicable substantive criteria identified in the staff report or other criteria which you believe applies to the decision from the comprehensive plan or the Dalles Municipal Code Title 10. 2, failure to raise an issue with enough statements or evidence sufficient to allow the city council and the parties an opportunity to respond to that issue prohibits an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Third, failure to participate in this public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. And finally, the city council's final decision must include findings of fact demonstrating the applicable standards are met with conditions, or not met. These are the rules. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions?
Okay, now we get into some disclosures. Do any counselors need to declare any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, or bias?
No.
Nope.
Counselor Runyon, Counselor Randall?
No.
As a reminder, ex parte contacts do not include site visits that do not involve communicating with a party and do not include communications with city staff or the city attorney. However, they do include newspaper articles and TV or radio broadcasts relating to a pending application and relied on by the counselor when making a final decision. Okay. The public hearing is now open. Staff will now present a staff report, and you have 20 minutes.
No, I'll just roll. Good evening, Mayor Mays, councilors, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. We're trying out this new timer thing for everybody here, even myself, but I think I'm just going to go the old school and go with my watch. As we discussed, as was introduced, this item is appeal number 39-25. The appellant is Theodore Valkov. There is no site address for this subdivision. These are the map and tax lot numbers. It is located right behind the hospital and is in the zoning, the low density zoning district. So this is the appeal of Planning Commission resolution number 627-25A, which denied appeal request 38-25 of the Community Development Director's decision dated March 21st, 2025, approving subdivision 86-24. Long story short, this is the second appeal for the approval of the subdivision by Jason Alfred. So this is a project timeline broken down here for you. This project's actually been around for a little bit. It was deemed complete September 17th, 2024. The notice of decision for that was March 21st, 2025. The reason for that, you'll see in italics at the bottom, the applicant submitted 2 timeline extensions during that period of time, which had extended the time frame for our past our typical 120 days. So therefore, it extended, as you can see, September 17th to March 21st. So there was a notice of appeal that was submitted for the subdivision March 31st. That was heard at Planning Commission April 17th. That notice of appeal was submitted April 28th. We turned right around and got it out the door. And here we have a city council meeting tonight. And due to the timeline extensions, the state mandated timeline, no more extensions allowed. So where city council needs to make their final determination tonight or schedule a special hearing next week. No pressure. So this is the subject property. This is located here, as you can see, behind the hospital. Here's a proposal, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 includes 14 lots. Phase 2 is 15 lots. Phase 1 is located in city limits. Phase 2 is outside city limits, but in the urban growth boundary. So therefore, before connecting to any city utilities, phase 2 will need to be annexed in. There was an additional land use review. It was a variance that was heard by the Planning Commission March 6th. This was to tweak the block width size internal to the subdivision. That was approved by Planning Commission on March 6th. So the appeal issues, the applicant or the appellant has provided various reasons. City Council should grant the appeal request. Staff has broken them into these 4: slope stability and landslide risk, inadequate road access and traffic hazards, wildfire risk and emergency response limitations, and procedural concerns and due process. There was also, the appellant had additional requests of council for the city to conditionally approve the subdivision on 3 separate items. First, they could do that with a full redesign of the subdivision layout, providing access by extending East 21st Street and ensuring a fair public participation. So I will touch base on all of these, the items as well as the requests. Please note, not all of these issues may be applicable criteria of the Dalles Municipal Code, but staff wanted to address all of them to include in the record. So the appeal issues, the first is slope stability and landslide risk. The appellant's concerns is that the site allegedly poses landslide dangers due to steep slopes, erodible soils, and past fill material. They argue that a geological study should have been required. So the site is not located in any of the city's mapped geologic hazard zones per the 2010 Geologic Hazard Studies Survey. Under city code, a geo study is only required of a development if it is located in one of those 5 zones. Although there are some slopes here that exceed 25%, steep slopes are regulated. They are not prohibited from being developed on. And then you go through a process called a physical constraints permit, which in this case, this entire site is going to be completely engineered through a physical constraints permit. So before construction begins, the applicant must submit a detailed grading and stabilization plans along with those engineered plans. They are reviewed by our engineering team with 60+ years of experience here in the Dalles. These safeguards ensure the development addresses slope stability and soil movement risks. And a quick note here, just for clarification, I think it might help out. The subdivision is really only the first step in the overall development of this site. This is kind of a 2D version. This is where we're looking at drawing the lines on the map. The physical constraints permit is the actual physical review of the site and the analysis to determine feasibility. A developer should assess proposed lots for overall feasibility when they're putting their application material together, but they're only required to determine whether or not they are buildable based on their civil plans, and this is at the physical constraints permit. So this is the topography. As you can see, the heavily hatched areas there, these are areas that are 25% slope. So it's clearly documented that there are areas of 25% slope on this site. This is a map of the city's geologic hazard zones. This was defined in the 2010 geologic hazard study prepared by Mark Yinger. As you can see, that star right there at the bottom, that is the subject property. So therefore it is located, you can see closer up here at the development site is located outside of all geologic hazard zones. So therefore a geotech study was not required with this development. So the second appeal issue is inadequate road access and traffic hazards. So the appellant's concern is that the steep curved access road, View Court and East 21st Street is unsafe, especially in the winter, and traffic studies did not account for these conditions. So the required traffic impact study was conducted in accordance with the Dalles Municipal Code and methodology laid out by the Public Works Department. It does not regulate seasonal changes. It only regulates the daily. You look at things like a daily trip counts, queuing counts, things like that. Traffic impact study is required for all development that proposes to build 16 or more units. So while the TIS does not assess winter weather hazards, this is consistent. It was consistent with accepted transportation engineering practices, which, like I said, focuses on more year-round design standards. At the April 17th Planning Commission meeting, the commission reviewed street design of the development and confirmed that the 50-foot proposed right-of-way, which you'll see on a set of plans here, it does meet the city standards per the transportation system plan. So the reason this came up is that the Dalles Municipal Code references a 54-foot minimum for a local street, but the TSP outlines a 50-foot minimum. The TSP, after consulting with legal counsel, the TSP was adopted in 2017 through the Municipal Code 98. So therefore, the standards, the minimum standards of the TSP would apply here. And although there are some, as you can see in here, as you'll see with some of the grades, although the proposed grade exceeds the standard 12% maximum allowed on local streets, the city engineer approved an exception to this based on the natural terrain and existing built environment around the development, where the existing grade actually leading into the development site is 16.5%. The proposed road leading into the development is about 15%, and all the roads inside are 10%. So thought it would be better, easier to see here, but you can see those four little dots there. Those are the dots, the four study intersections. This was the methodology for the traffic impact study that was laid out with approval from the Public Works Director. It does not address winter driving conditions, and the review, which was approved by the Public Works Department, did not call out any mitigation tactics that needed to take place with this development.
We have a laser pointer.
Sure. So this is a table of the transportation system plan, which was adopted in 2017. This is what I'm talking about, the discrepancy here. You can see it's a 50-foot. This is the standard that we go with all design of streets going forward. An applicant can always go to that 54-foot width, but the 50-foot is the minimum requirement. That is what's being proposed here. So the next appeal issue is wildfire risk and emergency response limitations. So the concerns here, once again, the steep slopes, the vegetation, and the single access raise evacuation and fire suppression concerns. The design, staff's response is that the design includes road improvements to reduce slope grades slightly coming into the site. They are less than leading into the development site itself. That whole entire neighborhood accessed by about 35 houses. The immediate intersection coming in is at 13.5%. So the subdivision itself will actually have less of a grade than the main road leading into that entire neighborhood. The fire code requires that the applicant provide a turnaround. So I'll get into the code. Since this is going to be built in two separate phases, phase 1 and phase 2, there's going to be a requirement that phase 1 is most likely coming first and phase 2 is going to wait. So therefore there's fire turnarounds that I will show. It's easier to explain that will need to be provided. Also, all the homes up in this subdivision will be required to install fire suppression systems. This is due to the fact that the site is accessed from a road exceeding a 10% grade. And taking a look, there's also a comment here that we will address, but getting into it now, the city code does not require that secondary access be provided. And there was also a mention of an alternative access by way of East 20th Street on the northern side, which was examined, but it was deemed topographically infeasible. Therefore, that was not a connection either. So this is what I was talking about with the emergency access. With this being built, there was this being developed in two phases. There are the two options. Phase one, with phase one being developed first, they need to ensure that there is fire turnaround access. So the option is that in the blue, those fire hammerheads could be installed here. That is one option. The other option is to develop the area in red. These would not have to be built to full city standards during construction, but they would need to be designed to allow for an 85,000-pound fire truck apparatus. So these are two options that they can go with to meet the fire access requirements. Also touching on fire access, fire concerns. These are three hydrants that are being proposed. And speaking to the fire marshal, there will actually be another one that's required on the turnaround, actually on the private access road, private access drive, which is the dashed area to the south here. So that'll be something that is reviewed and approved at the time of final plans. This is the secondary access to point it out visually for everybody. As I mentioned, it is not required, and it is also a grade that exceeds 17%. I think it's 17.5%. So if we're talking about excessive grades leading to the side, it is actually much worse than what is already there. Also touching on secondary access, there was a mention in here that East 21st Street should be connected through to another connector road. If you look here, I tried showing it the best I can. There is no road to the east of this property. The area that is red is a driveway, and that is a private easement. It is not public right-of-way. So there is no connection to an existing street to the east, and the outlet to the east is actually onto private property. So the last appeal issue is one of procedural concerns and due process. The appellant alleges the city rushed the process, gave inadequate notice, and failed to meaningfully consider public input. So the application process followed all procedural requirements of the Dalles Municipal Code and Oregon Land Use Law. Notices were sent to nearby property owners within 100 feet of the development site, and a 14-day comment period was observed. During that comment period, multiple comments were received. One of those was a petition signed by about 22 residents, all of which were entered into the record and considered with the Planning Commission. This application was not expedited. In fact, the applicant voluntarily extended the review timeline twice, resulting in a total timeline period of 245 days, not the 120 typical days. So it is much longer, probably twice the amount of time than a typical application is. So the record clearly shows the public was given opportunities to participate and that safety issues were actively evaluated. So on to the appellant's request. Going through these, the redesign, the appellant's request is recommending replacing the proposed loop road with cul-de-sacs. I think there are some, I think the appellant will actually provide those in some visuals here coming up. Staff's response here is that ORS 227-178-3, which is known as the goalpost rule, prohibits local governments from changing approval right criteria or requiring new design elements after an application has been deemed complete. The Dalles Municipal Code does not authorize a remand of a complete land use application to redesign infrastructure. Under Oregon law, the city must issue a final decision within 120 days unless those timelines are extended by the applicant and only by the applicant. Remanding the application for a redesign would violate the deadline and is therefore not legally permissible. The next here is improving neighborhood access by extending East 21st Street. We touched on this briefly in this previous slide, so I won't get too into it. But as you can see, there isn't really a connection for this to connect to. So therefore, it is not a viable option. And this is just a recap of that. And then the final is going back in, ensuring a fair public participation process. The appellant requests that longer lead times between application submission and public hearings be heard to increase community involvement. As I mentioned earlier, the go post rule, we can't change in the middle of the game. And also code requires that we are to approve these applications within 120 days. 120 days, if it goes through the full appeal process, is actually still cutting it pretty close because the planning commission meeting was a month ago and we have appeal notifications built into it. So 120 days pads some time, but if an application does go through an appeal process, you do find yourself running up against the clock with the typical 120 days. The city fully complied with notice and hearing procedures as outlined in the municipal code. Once the application was deemed complete, the city could not alter the schedule to allow additional lead time without violating state mandated timelines. So looking into the review criteria, I won't get into all of it. I understand I am on a clock here, but I do want to let you know this is a list of the review criteria that goes into reviewing a subdivision application. Our staff reports have been relatively the same from the very beginning. We have not changed course. We have followed the findings of the Dalles. We've made findings based on the Dalles Municipal Code. The tweaks that you will see with the staff reports are merely to address additional comments through the appeal process or changes as a result of planning commission discussions. So going through them, the first here, I won't go through all, but I'll kind of just touch on the high level. This is really looking at the appeal procedures. The appellant was a party of record, submitted the request on time, and there was no jurisdictional defects. So therefore, this application could move forward. Looking at these two redevelopment plans and RL zoning district, a redevelopment plan is when you are not meeting density and a plan must be provided. They are meeting density here. No redevelopment plan is required. The RL zoning district, all but one lot meets the width requirement. So that lot as a condition of approval is going to be required to just extend out about 5 feet wider. Therefore, all of these would meet zoning requirements of the low density zone. 10.6 general regulations. This touches on fire access, which we talked about earlier, and giving those options as a condition of approval. The applicant has the options of what they're going to do, which type of fire turnaround. Also, this touches on the requirements for the fire suppression system. Physical and environmental constraints. This is the chapter that talks about geohazard zones. It lays out the requirements of a physical constraints permit. We touched on some of those, but ultimately what it comes down to is a condition of this development, they will be required to submit a physical constraints permit with fully engineered plans, and there will not be a geotech report required with this development. Looking at 10.9, this is land division standards. This is the bread and butter of a land division, as you can imagine. Looking in here, you basically, we found that the requirements, lot size requirements, width requirements, all but that one lot have been met. There was a variance to reduce the block width slightly. The phase 2 is required to be annexed in prior to connection to utilities. These findings touch on block width dimension, things like that. It was found that the block width actually, the block length, we were talking about block width earlier, the block length it actually exceeds 450 feet. And since it exceeds 450 feet, the applicant will be required to install a pedestrian pathway in between the north and south portions of the block. I'll show an image of that in a little bit. And then 10.10, we talk about improvements required with development. I think it's best to show probably this.
Josh, you have
Yep.
30 seconds.
All right, great. So these are the improvements in red. This is what's being proposed in green. These are existing houses. The developer will be required to install brand new sidewalks and drive approaches for those houses. And then also the yellow is that ped path that goes north to south. And these are some easements that they will be improving. And with that, I have a council alternative staff's recommendation here, and I think I'm right about at time, but these are also included in your packet. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. It's time for the city council to ask questions of our Director of Community Development. I have several, but
like to give the council an opportunity to go first. So does anybody like to ask questions of the director at this point?
I have a couple.
Counselor Richardson.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for the graphics, the maps. They're very helpful. Help me understand the process with regard to the physical constraint permit. So the developer gets a subdivision permit, which has been granted and been appealed. That's why we're here tonight. If allowed, if upheld, I guess I should say, if the appeal is denied, then it goes forward. You will be requiring a physical constraint permit. And once that is written up, then the developer will have to go back to community development for site permits, or is the physical constraint sort of the last hurdle to get over?
Yeah, so process is, the first step is the land use process. That is approving the use. That is approving the lines on the map. After that, their next step, this is basically what you would call like preliminary or tentative plat approval, is basically what would happen from this action. From there, for staff to actually fully review the subdivision itself, engineered plans need to be provided showing all the details, all the utilities, all the, in this case, the physical constraints permit aspects of it, cutting and filling, slope stabilizations, retaining walls that may be built. That packet, that civil engineered packet, comes to us with a physical constraints permit. We review the entire site. Typically, we send back red lines. They make those tweaks. Once a final set is approved, it goes to the applicant and they can move forward with actually starting to construct the site itself.
So that's a back and forth process to some degree. They say we're going to cut X yards of fill and we're going to compact it to whatever, 5%. And you say we want to compact it to 10%.
The structural fill on a property itself would be something that's more a function of building codes. But when they're talking about compaction for like our roadways and things like that of city utilities, that's something that we have city standards that they would have to meet. So it's really kind of, going in there and making check that the details that they are providing are meeting city standards.
Can or does a physical constraints permit process ever result in the realignment of a proposed set of parcels? Do you ever redraw the lines or ask the developer to redraw the lines based on that process?
I haven't seen it happen through the physical constraints permit process. Ultimately, a development, when it goes through and is reviewed through the tentative process, the tentative plat process, it must substantially conform at the end, is basically what our code says. So we understand that when you do your final surveying, when you do your final engineering, there can be some slight tweaks here and there, but it can't be significant changes. But we have seen at times there's, square footages here and there that may have been missed, but we're talking as long as everything complies with the code and it meets the standards still, then it can move forward.
You said, Josh, that a geotech study would not be part of the PC permit. Is that something we could require?
I do not believe we could require that because our code specifically says that these are only required in this instance.
That is sites that fall within those 5 identified geohazard.
Correct.
Counselor, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question?
No, I don't.
Good, then I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
Could you explain the difference and be very specific as the difference between a physical constraints permit and civil engineering plans? Or perhaps our Director of Public Works would be better qualified to.
Yeah, no, the physical constraints permit, that is really like the application that is tied to the plans themselves, similar to like a building permit. You would have your building permit and then you would have the plans for the building permit. So they kind of go together effectively. It's the physical constraints permit is really the avenue, the vehicle, application that is attached to the plans themselves.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you. I want to be clear. Don't have my mind made up, but I'm asking just for clarification or clarity in my own mind. Is there a process for staff or for the city to say, a particular project poses an unforeseen risk, or we've missed something in the codes and we have to act for health or safety or hazard to a neighbor's property?
I mean, I may need to lean on counsel for that question, legal counsel. I think Chris Crean just popped up on the video. Maybe he can help us answer that one.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The short answer is no. The law has gotten pretty specific in recent years that we can only apply the standards that are in the development code. You can certainly revise those going forward, but once an application is submitted, you're stuck with what your code says and what it requires. The policy there, I suppose, is that it wouldn't be so hard for a council that was inclined to find that there was some hardship or some kind of impact and start imposing requirements that weren't really based in the code. So to deal with that, the legislature some number of years ago imposed what's called a fixed goalpost rule, and you can only apply the standards that are in your code.
May I, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Crean, would you mind introducing yourself and who you're with? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. My name's Chris Crane. I'm an attorney with the firm of Beery, Elsner, and Hammond, and we represent local governments and only local governments all over the state. We are general counsel for, I don't know, a couple dozen cities and special districts, and then we represent several dozen more as special counsel, such as the city of the Dalles as special land use counsel.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson?
Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Crean. Dan Richardson here. I'm one of the city councilors tonight. A question for you. Is there any provision anywhere that were to allow a city or local government to recognize, an overlooked hazard, something that wasn't in code or on a map that became evident to staff or other professionals? Is there any ejection button, so to speak, to say, well, wait a minute, there's been a blind spot that we have seen on the ground here, and we need to sort of stop and consider this?
Again, the short answer is no, there's really not. I mean, I suppose if a big sinkhole were to open up on the property, that would have to change the developer's plans, but that would be on them to try to take that into account and engineer around it. I've had situations where, and this is amazing to hear it, but a developer was looking at a piece of property and discovered there was a waterfall on the property. But we can only apply the standards that are in the code on the date the application is submitted, even if you discover some kind of unusual circumstance regarding the property.
That's all for right now.
I've got a couple questions. At the time, and these are extension of your questions. At the time of the application submitted for review, did the applicant meet all state and local requirements to develop property?
Yes, but conditionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And further, since the date of the appeal, are you aware of any extenuating circumstances? For example, a sinkhole, a slide, something that affects the property?
I am not aware of anything.
That answers my questions.
Councilor Ring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's several conditions that I read in here as a part of the development of the property. I'm curious, some of those related to land stability and whatnot will be likely reviewed when you get engineering drawings, like a civil drawing, right?
Yep.
Okay. So you'll be able to check those provisions at that time. When do those get checked during construction? Like when you build a house, you're going to have to wait for, codes inspection to put drywall up and whatnot. But
yeah. Yeah, so there is, how we've, and as you can see, looking through, we've broken these out. Our conditions are broken out really into milestones. And, those milestones effectively, I described it, to one person that it's we go around and we have this checklist, and before we approve, before it can go to the next milestone, we go through and we check the boxes. Do you have any specific that you're talking about as far as us enforcing? Of course, you know, a developer is required to, well, they're required to build the entire subdivision infrastructure before we even sign the final plat. And then there's a 1-year defect warranty that they have to provide as well. So any, you know, curb cracks, the line breaks, they're responsible for fixing it all without in that 1 year. After that, when it comes to actually building out the site, you know, we then deal with Wasco County building codes. But do you have any specific? I think I cut you off there.
No, I don't think I have anything that was specific that I wanted to go over, but because I think they're rather straightforward. Yeah, no, that's
Okay. Counselor Runyon, do you have any questions before I start in?
I believe I did have a number of questions that were pretty thoroughly covered by Counselor Richardson and Counselor McLaughlin. So I yield.
Okay. Mr. Chandler, you administratively approved the applicant's application on March 21st. What exactly does it mean when you administratively approve an application for a new subdivision?
It's effectively kind of like that tentative approval. It's the plan set as provided to us. That is our approval before basically giving them the go ahead and the green light to move forward with the civil engineered plans.
What if no appeal had been filed? Would that change your answer?
No.
Okay. Referring to your staff report on page 42. Second paragraph. The appellant referenced an external soil type, non-cohesive granular type C soil, not incorporated into the municipal code, and therefore not a basis for site-specific hazard determinations within the city's planning jurisdiction. What exactly is meant by not incorporated into the Dalles Municipal Code?
And it's not a mention.
As it relates to that soil sample.
Yeah, so it's not a sample. We don't use this classification anywhere in the Dalles Municipal Code, so we wouldn't be able to go through and determine whether or not it meets or does not meet. For instance, if it was listed in the code and they had, I don't even know these soil types, but A through E, sites can only be developed on these types of soils, then we could go through it. That's clear and objective. We could check the box and say, hey, it's located in this zone, but it is not a recognized classification system we use.
Okay. Same paragraph. You talk about that 2010 geological hazard study, and you talked about those 5 zones. And I understand now from Councilor Richardson's question that we cannot, even if we wanted to, require a geological study because that's what our municipal code says.
Okay.
But my question is, how big of an area did that 2010 study incorporate?
It incorporated at least all of the urban growth boundary.
The urban growth boundary only?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd have to see like if there was anything done outside of it, but that was a report commissioned by the city. So I would imagine it was all urban growth boundary.
Okay, at the last sentence on page 42, and it goes into page 43. That last sentence, that permit process ensures that grading impacts and slope stability are addressed holistically at the subdivision stage. How do you define holistically?
Yeah, that's taking a look at, as I've touched on, when that's approved and built out, we ensure that all the bounds of the property, basically the entire property boundary is reviewed through that physical constraints engineered plan process.
As opposed to a lot by lot.
Yeah.
thing?
And then coming up the lot by lot, there is also an additional check because all these lots, we understand we're getting this site built out. It's building on, these roads are being built on some, excess grade, things of that nature. But once the lots are actually built, then each individual home that comes through, it may require its own physical constraints permit. A physical constraints permit is triggered by 50 cubic yards of dirt. If you go over, or cut and fill, if you go over 250, then you're getting an engineered plan. So basically, the whole entire subdivision is being reviewed, and then on an individual site basis at a later date, you may have additional physical constraints permits for the build.
Now that you mentioned the 50 cubic yards and the 250, I was going to ask a question about that. Who actually measures that to make sure that the developer is complying with the 250 cubic yard threshold?
It is. So when you hit 250, you're providing, at that stage, you're providing engineered plans. But the Dalles Municipal Code actually requires that we document whenever there's a site moves more than 10 cubic yards. Between 10 and 50, we don't require anything. We just require it to be documented. And 50 to 250, that's the physical constraints permit. Calculations are shown. Our engineering team takes a look at the drawings, takes a look at the information. And then at 250 and above, you're providing those engineered plans.
So our engineering term keeps track of all that.
Yep, that's correct.
Same paragraph, page 43, second paragraph, second sentence. Since the proposed area of the soil disturbance exceeds 1 acre, a Department of Environmental Quality permit will also be required to ensure erosion and sediment control practices are implemented consistent with state regulations. How does a DEQ permit any different than what the city is requiring?
So the city is going to require the 1200C. I think it's specific to, I have engineer correct me if I'm wrong. This one is specific to stormwater control. So the DEQ has multiple types of 1200C permits. But this is the reason this is a little bit different is that it's only when the site exceeds 1 acre. So our review is looking at, we would look at stormwater on our end, but this is just an additional requirement due to the size of the property.
And that's a state requirement, obviously.
Correct, yeah.
Bottom of the page, the last paragraph. Traffic studies conducted using the city's TIS standards does not evaluate vehicle performance in weather-specific conditions, such as snow and ice. I believe you refer to those as seasonal developments.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I have to ask, should traffic studies evaluate those kinds of things?
I think that might be a question for engineering. I think the answer would probably be no. But typically your traffic counts are looking at the impact of the additional development on, the added traffic volume and the impact that it has on intersections.
We do have our Director of Public Works here. If you'd like to comment, I'd invite you to come up but if you don't want to comment, that's fine too.
Please use the microphone.
Why don't you introduce yourself? Yeah.
Dale McCabe, Public Works Director for City of the Dalles. The traffic impact study is just that. It's for determining what the impact is going to be to the adjacent roads with the new development. So a subdivision of 16 lots or more triggers the requirement for a traffic impact study, or if there's a development that is triggering more than 400 ADTs, which is your average daily trips. That's the other requirement that triggers a traffic impact study. But we do not look at, what weather impacts might be for that. We then require what intersections are going to be impacted by that adjacent development. And that's what's being studied for that development.
Okay, thank you. You might want to stay here for the next question.
Okay.
The city engine, I'm on page 44, second paragraph, second to last sentence. The city engineer participated in the review process of the subdivision proposals and agrees that due to the site's challenging terrain, The proposed subdivision's grading justifies exceeding the 12% maximum grade otherwise required for the connection to East 21st Street here, particularly because East 21st Street currently has a 16.5% grade at that location, and the applicant is proposing a 15% grade. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like we're allowing an exception to the 12% threshold that our municipal code calls for because the streets in that area already exceed the 12% threshold. Is that?
Yes, that would be correct. So we have quite a few streets around town that exceed that 12% threshold.
Yeah, I know that pretty well. Page 45. First paragraph. Second sentence. Additionally, due to the steep access roads, all future dwellings will be required to install NFPA 13D residential fire suppression systems. So what do steep access roads have to do with requiring a stricter residential suppression system?
Yeah, so it is a fire code requirement. I believe the fire marshal Grant is here, might be able to answer those questions as well. But the standard is effectively if you can only access a site from a road that exceeds 10%, then it is required to have fire suppression in all of those units being built.
These are internal to the structures, not
Correct.
landscape. All right.
Correct.
So the steeper the grade, the less likely an 85,000-pound fire apparatus will be able to get up the hill. Is that the?
I guess that's probably the theory behind it. And then the fire suppression system would slow down or mitigate the fire hazard until equipment is there.
Is this requirement above and beyond what is required of other houses in the Dalles?
Yes.
Yeah. Will these fire suppression systems prevent wildfires?
The fire suppression systems are designed to protect structural damage. I don't think they can entirely mitigate wildfire, but they are designed to mitigate the structural damage, individual structural damage.
Page 46, you alluded to this before in your report. The first paragraph under B, the appellant requests the city commit to extending East 21st Street eastward to connect with a major collector road. You said, did he give an example or he or she give an example of what that major collector road would be?
There was no example provided, and I searched and could not find the nearest. The nearest collector is 19th Street, which is there would be no connection of East 21st at that point. Doesn't make sense.
Well, they run parallel.
Exactly.
Okay, I guess I can ask the appellant that question.
Yeah, and the TSP doesn't call for the extension of East 21st in that section either, so it would be a question for the appellant.
Okay, I had some questions on the findings of fact number 19, but you've already answered. I was going to ask about the number of cubic yards. Who's responsible for making sure that they don't exceed the 250 cubic yards without us checking it? And then you already alluded to the fact that the people, the engineers, the city employees that will be monitoring this have, you said, years of experience in working with the other developers and subdivisions? Is that?
Yeah, I don't want to age any of them, but I think 60 years, maybe even 60 here at the city, if not more.
Okay,
And we're all licensed engineers.
right. All right, that's all the questions I had. Anybody else? Last shot for asking our Director of Community Development any questions before we move on to the applicant.
I have one, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is for our community development director or for our attorney. I'm curious, could the city, as part of its physical constraint permit process or developing the civil engineering plan set, could the city hire and conduct a geotech study?
Yes, but it wouldn't be tied to any particular development. The city could, it's been since 2010, I think, since the previous hazard study was completed. I think before that it was 1991. And so it seems, every 20 years or so, the city does engage a professional geologist, and in this case, Mark Yinger, who has a tremendous amount of experience in this community, to conduct these studies. And if the council would like to have a new study commissioned, that's absolutely something that we can do. And then once that study is commissioned and presented to the city, if council wanted to incorporate its findings into the municipal code for use for future applications, that would absolutely be something that council would just direct staff to prepare a Ludo text amendment to our code. And we would remove reference to the old 2010 study and put in the 2025 as the case was.
Thank you. That's a very informative answer. That's, I suppose, not precisely the question I had in mind. Could we hire and conduct a site-specific geotech study for our own information and perhaps consideration during the civil engineering process? Not requiring the developer. Could we do it and say, were we concerned enough? Council, could we direct staff to have that?
I'll take a shot in the dark on this. It sounds to me kind of like a phase one environmental study, and people conduct phase ones as part of real estate transactions, even when they don't own the property. And I don't see a reason why, if it was just using observations from the right of way and other historical data and site maps, that the city couldn't do that for, theoretically, every place in the Dalles, not just this development site, if the city wanted to, or if anybody wanted to, really.
I had to put you on the spot. Dale, do you have any engineering thoughts on that idea? Would that be at all helpful, useful, or potentially included in staff's consideration of process going forward?
I mean, it could be information that once a report and study is site specific for that area, we would have to, take into consideration what the findings were with that report and that came out of it, if there was any.
Yeah.
So again, this is sort of beyond the scope of a subdivision application, which is the application that's before this council tonight, but is connected with a physical constraints permit. The community development director has the authority to require additional plans and studies from the developer to ensure that they meet the criteria of a physical constraints permit. And so another way to say that is a lot of the concerns that were raised in the notice of appeal and that were a part of the record of this matter at the Planning Commission were concerning soil stability and erosion. And again, the application before the Planning Commission and again now before the City Council is a subdivision application. And when and if a physical constraints permit is submitted for the city's review, that would be the time for requiring additional plans and studies that are site specific. But beyond that, the city can always do its own studies if it wanted to.
Sure. Thank you. I understand that my question doesn't change sort of the facts that we're dealing with this evening,
Right.
with the decision this evening. But however, from time to time, it's useful for us to direct staff and say, we need certain things taken care of.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions for the Director of Community Development or the Director of Public Works?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Ring.
Really quick question. I'm curious, when were the other homes in the area constructed that are bordering the proposed subdivision? You know that?
I can recall, I think the two newest were probably built 2019, 2020.
That's on Claudia.
Yeah. Claudia, it's the easement that leads into those houses. The other two houses, I'm not too entirely sure, that are kind of on the northern side of things. I think the appellant lives in one of those houses. I'm not entirely sure when that house was built. I have to dig into records, but the two newest houses, are about 5 years old, let's say.
Okay. And out of curiosity, since the street going to that area is pretty steep, because it wasn't part of a larger subdivision, I'm wondering, the fire suppression system didn't have the same requirements at the time of construction, probably.
It did not have that requirement.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the staff here? Okay, thanks you. Thank you. Now is the time for the applicant to present their project. Is the applicant present? Please come forward, introduce yourself. You have 20 minutes to present.
Mr. Mayor, just one question for the city clerk. Are we able to get the timer up on the screen? I know we didn't have it during the planning director's presentation. Yeah? How big?
There it is.
That looks good.
Yeah.
Seems great to me if it works.
You guys see that all right?
But I don't believe that this is the applicant's presentation.
No.
I think that you might have the wrong one. Does the applicant have a presentation?
We do not, sir.
Okay, so there's no PowerPoint or anything? Oh, there you
Just
go.
make sure the clock is up and working. Okay. Ready to go? There.
That looks great.
Can you see that? Oh. Okay, introduce yourselves and we'll move on. We got 20 minutes.
My name's Jason Alpern. I'm the applicant. My address here.
Yes.
Address is 219 State Route 115, Washington. How much to say?
Oh, that's fine.
My name is Darren Eckman with AKS Engineering and Forestry. You may know us also as Tennyson Engineering for 70 years here in the Dalles. I've actually been here for 29 years.
Mhm.
Um,
But can I ask you guys to speak directly into the microphone? Make sure everybody can hear you. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Address is 3775 Crates Way, the Dalles, Oregon. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Mayor and the councilors for hearing this appeal tonight. We appreciate your time and effort that you've spent reviewing this. The applicant, while this project has gone almost 240 days or 245 days at this point, it actually extended much further. The original design of this project began back in 2022. It wasn't submitted to the city until 2024 after going through a couple different site team reviews and applications. With each application, we continue to refine and make adjustments to the plan. Hopefully everyone can hear, or do I need to get adjustments to the plan based upon input from the city staff. And, you know, in doing so, we also noticed that there was a few shortcomings to the project. For example, the not meeting the minimum block width requirement that then brought in going through another public process, going through the planning commission for a variance, which was approved. And finally, you know, we feel that with the couple conditions that have been added to the project, such as increasing the lot width to the minimum 50 feet and adding the hydrant at the end of the private fire or private access road, we meet all the city subdivision requirements regarding lot density, lot dimensions, roadway requirements, utility services, etc. And that's borne by the fact that there's 64 conditions that have been, or findings that have been reviewed and identified by city staff. And in each case, possibly with conditions, our application meets those requirements. Regarding the appellant's issues, I won't speak with regards to the wildfire or the procedural concerns and due process. I think Joshua has handled that more than clear enough. But instead, I'll talk a little bit about the slope stability and landslide risk. The soils on the site are basically composed of Chenoweth and Cherry Hill silt loams. They typically are at a depth of about 36 to 42 inches over a soft sandstone bed. So it's not like there's a mass amount of just dirt that's going to slump or spill. In fact, during all of our visits on the site itself, there's no signs of slumping or soil cracking or fracturing on the applicant's property. The couple photos that were taken by the appellant and put into their appeal actually occur below the houses to the west of the applicant's property and just on the south side of East 20th Street. They're actually not on the applicant's property. There are portions of, within the applicant's property, it's very well vegetated. And there's no signs of soil erosion or rilling occurring on the property. This goes to disprove the idea that soil erosion is going to occur as a steep slope. There are existing slopes on the property, particularly at the south end, that are cut banks or cut slopes that are standing at a 1-to-1 or basically a 50%, 100% slope. These slopes are stable. They've stood there for a number of decades at this point and do not show signs of eroding or slumping or mass earth movements. While it's not pertinent, the Mark Ginger study of 2010 did look at all properties within the urban growth boundary and the city limits. It did not identify this property as being within one of the 5 hazard areas that he identified. The nearest one is located approximately 1,000 feet to the east and north from the site. Moreover, actually north of the hospital and in like the Sunridge subdivision, Thompson Track portion of property. While it's not applicable, the Wasco County base map does not identify this as being within a geologic hazard zone either. The hospital is located within the geologic hazard zone, as is the city water reservoir up on the ridge to the east of the sites. So when you think about all these soils are relatively uniform throughout this area, you have a major hospital built on this material. You have the oncology center built on this material. You have a city infrastructure, water reservoir, and pipeline built within this area. And nothing's moved. There's no hazards. It's not falling apart. It's not collapsing. It's not falling down. That speaks to the stability of the soil. In addition to those major structures, this ground is no different than the properties that are already built on to the west of our site. All the lots off of View Court, East 20th, East 21st involve significant amounts of cut and fill in order to create a building pattern. In some cases, the house might be 1 or 2 levels below or above grade, simply due to how the ground sits in relationship to the road. There's one house off of View Court that almost has like a bridge structure going to it. It's almost directly across from 20th. There was in addition to the photos depicting like what he called headscarp or slump area, I would call a slump area, that actually are not on the applicant's property. The other thing that I think may have been misstated within the appeal was the fact or the statement that the roads are being built on fill and such. And all of our roads were designed actually to fit the existing ground as best as possible. There's no roadways that we're proposing that are being built out on new fill material. basically that the land is terraced in about 3 different levels with steep slopes intervening between each. We tried to identify building sites on the terraces and then fit the roadways in between those building sites on the terraces as well to avoid constructing, having unnecessary fill. We did show on our grading plan the possibility of extending some of the lots on the north side of Smith Loop out with fill. If that was done, it would be a structurally engineered fill material. It would be reviewed through the physical constraints permit process. The actual work would be examined and inspected at every stage of the work. The exposed soils would be revegetated to prevent erosion, and then those areas could be built upon by individual homeowners. But the actual public infrastructure is all built on existing soil. The other thing that I would like to talk about is the statement about inadequate road access and traffic hazards. As Joshua noted, extending East 21st, well, first of all, East 21st getting to our site is steeper than what we're proposing to make East 21st on our site, difference of about 1% grade. In addition, our section of steep over 15% slope of East 21st Street is only about 200 feet long. After that, the remaining 1,500 feet of roadway within our development is all 10% or less. In fact, I think it's 9.6% steepest slope outside of that section of 15%. As people have noted, there are many streets within the Dalles that far exceed that 10% slope. View Court steeper than all of our interior streets, since it's at 13.5%. Again, our steeper internal streets are 9.6. The traffic studies, as noted, they examine the capacity of intersections and how traffic flows are handled by the existing infrastructure. And when inadequacy is noted, then the developer would be on the hook to help pay for part or all of the improvements that are necessary. But it doesn't take into winter conditions or other driving conditions. It's more looking at the capacity, how many cars pass through that intersection safe and efficient. The extension of East 21st Street, as again, city staff has noted, not planned by the city. It's not in the TSP. It would exceed 16%. In fact, it's 17+%. And there's no legal access across that private properties that could get us anywhere farther east or north. A second access is not required by code. And these steeper roads, we are mitigating through the requirement of having residential fire sprinklers within any of the proposed homes that are that, as Councilman Ring noted, fairly new homes were not required to do that, and they actually maybe should have been fire. There's interpretation, all parts, and obviously one house coming in now and then probably doesn't get the same level of review as a 28 lot subdivision. Kind of to wrap things up, we feel that we meet all of the city requirements with the conditions that have been imposed upon us. We do appreciate the city staff efforts and fully support their recommendation to deny the appeal and affirm the planning commission denial.
Thank you. Questions for I'm sorry, your last name again?
Ekman, Aaron Ekman.
Right. Questions for Mr. Ekman or Mr. Alford?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Really quick. Sir, you said earlier what was the depth to, I believe you stated it was sandstone or
Soft sandstone bedrock. So it's approximate. The soil studies that were done by the NRCS back in the 70s, identifying the Chenoweth's area or Chenoweth silt loams, that the depth's approximately 41 inches. It's obvious, you know, take that for what it's, but I think I mentioned 3 to 4.
Thank you.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask. I have several questions I'd like to ask. Was there any effort to meet with the neighbors?
I met with all of the neighbors, minus the appellant, because he did not answer his door for me when I went over to approach him. But I have been talking with the other neighbors directly touching my property, and the orchard is behind me for about 2 years on this project to help alleviate pains that the previous builder actually did. Help fix stuff that previous builder did when they built their homes. So yes, I've been talking with all of them for a couple years now regarding this.
Okay. I'm looking at the planning commission minutes. And we got this late, so the page numbers are actually coincide with the minutes themselves, not the total packet. And I'd like to refer to page 9. That's attachment 7, by the way. Attachment 7, page 9. Under applicant rebuttal.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, I did not print out attachment 7. City staff would put that up.
It's okay, I'll read it real slow.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ackman, that's you. Address concerns raised by the appellant and neighbors regarding soil stability, grading, and drainage. Blah, blah, blah. He stated that none of the proposed development area is located within a designated geological hazard zone on the Wasco County base map, which you stated. When was that base map? You know, we got this 2010 study. We've got this study. The appellant has a study of their own, which we'll be getting to later. Can you address this, how this map might dovetail with the 2010, if it does at all, or what the date of that was? We know 2010 study was in 2010, so.
So I believe, but I'm not certain, that Wasco County basically digitized the records from the Department of Geologic and Mineral Industries, DOGAMI, which is a state of Oregon agency. And that is the areas that you see on the Wasco County base map. Wasco County did not actually commission a soil study throughout Wasco County.
Mhm. Okay. Now you have talked about this kind of extensively, but I want to give you a chance to be more specific or to add to your comments. You emphasize that steep slopes in the vicinity have remained stable for decades. Decades. How do you possibly know that?
Because I personally have seen them. I've been with Tennyson Engineering for 29 years, and we've been involved with the Alford and Smith property for that long as well.
Okay. And did I hear you just say too that the grade of all the streets are at 9% grade?
No, sir. Except for the one section of East 21st Street that is at 15.6, the next steepest part of our road grade is 9.6%.
Okay, and that's the part of East 21st that is on the eastern edge of the property?
Actually, it's coming up still on the western end. As it goes
on the
down
western.
on the eastern end, it mitigates a little bit, and then all of Smith Loop is flat.
Okay, and then the appellant wanted you guys to extend the east part of East 21st eastward. That's where I'm a little confused. Yeah,
That's correct. We
Right.
stopped East 21st, and if we had extended it, or if we needed to extend it further east, we would basically the existing ground grade exceeds 17%.
Right.
And therefore the road grade without significant cut or fill would be that match that same grade.
Okay. The appellant has suggested 3 solutions to make the development more acceptable. One of them is, and you briefly mentioned the larger lot sizes. Will you please address why you would not be open to making the lot sizes larger?
Don't necessarily know if the appellant recommended larger lot sizes. They recommended a different road configuration that utilized 3 cul-de-sacs that emitted off of north-south streets off of East 21st. That still doesn't mitigate the 15.6% slope of East 21st Street. It also cul-de-sacs, in our experience, tend to eat up more land area, and therefore you'll get less lots per acre. That then begins to conflict with the city requirements of a minimum density.
Okay, I was going to ask you about the 3 cul-de-sacs. Are you saying that you think that that goes with the request for larger lot sizes is copacetic with the 3 cul-de-sacs? If you went to the 3 cul-de-sac system that they're proposing, it would actually increase the size of the lots.
It may, but I did not see where the appellant actually said to go to larger lots.
Okay, I thought I did, but we can take that up with them.
When I was reviewing their recommendations that staff, they asked A, to redesign the subdivision layout, B, improve neighborhood access by extending East 21st Street, and C, ensure fair public.
Yeah, I thought I read that. Mr. Chandler, do you have any knowledge of them requesting larger lots?
I don't have, I don't have recollection of that. I think you might ask the appellant.
Okay. We've also, all right, we've addressed those 3. Attachment 14.
You have to read real slow again.
I will. Page 284. First bullet point. Facts have been, I won't read that part. That's not it. Okay. The applicant owns additional lots adjacent to the subject property. With this fact, it becomes apparent that the subdivision is a spearhead for a much more massive development, which will affect public safety and quality of life in a manner far deeper than what this subdivision alone implies. Do you have any comment on that?
The applicant owns a total of 3 lots, 2 of which are part of this subdivision development, and 1 sets farther to the east. It would be served off that easterly extension of East 21st Street, which we've already established won't meet city roadway requirements. The applicant, as far as I know, owns no other property.
Okay. Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you. Last call for, you look like you want to say something. No? Okay, sorry. Anybody?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you very much.
You.
Okay, now is the time for the appellant to speak. You have up to 20 minutes. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. And I'm getting mindful of the time, you guys. If you want to take a break after this testimony, we'll see what happens in 20 minutes. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Ted Valkov, resident at 2102 Claudia Lane. And good evening. My name is Ted Valkov, resident at 2102 Claudia Lane, and I'm party of record in the proceedings for this subdivision.
My name's Pam Danzer. I'm at 2100 Claudia Lane, and I participated in this too.
Navigate for me. Mr. Mayor, esteemed councilors, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment on this matter. I have lived, I'm a recent newcomer to town. I have lived here for about 20 years, and I realize that this involves property that has been held for many generations by people who have very deep roots, and I'm privileged to have the opportunity to speak up about this. What motivates me is I don't really speak for myself. There are about 20 of us. I personally got involved relatively recently. I really got into this about a month ago. But there are about 20 of us who had serious concerns about the property. And we got together, we compared, correlated, combined comments, complaints, concerns. And I also want to thank the people behind me who gave me the opportunity to speak for them tonight. I observe in this meeting, I think actually you understand what's at stake. So I'm going to change a little bit my message. I would please ask Amanda, Amy, cut me 1 minute before my time or just jump at the end, because
What do you want to do?
about a minute before the 20 minutes, just cut me and
sure.
jump to the last slide.
Yeah, go ahead and do it. Yeah.
Thank you. One thing that we wanted to do was not just give you endless complaints. In addition to the presentation, we submitted a study, basically a printout, that has about, I believe, 16 objections. And, you know, we have to learn your language. We have to learn your procedures as we go along. This is really new to me. But in this recent write-out, we basically try to provide you what you call applicable criteria. And you're going to find out in the write-out, we reference, for every single objection, we reference what we believe are applicable provisions of the municipal codes. So I will not be able to do this during the presentation. I mean, frankly, that is a game on Jason's. But we believe that there are serious nuisances and problems surrounding this planned subdivision. We think that they can be addressed in a relatively effective and inexpensive way by conceptual changes. And we basically would like to plead with you to not rush and affirm the plan as it stands, because as Jason said it himself much better than me, once you affirm this kind of becomes the layout for the neighborhood. We can go to the next slide, please. Just to remind you of some features, I understand that the engineering plans may be difficult to read at times. Loop road, a single dogleg road access are there. One feature we didn't talk about is this embankment, which if you actually measure what is on the plan, it's about 500 feet long and a height of 10 to 20 feet, depending on how we interpret the elevation contours. It's a pretty massive piece of earthworks. This embankment is there because if you build a loop road, then you have no place for houses. And that's basically one of the major constraints of the subdivision. As you can see in the hatch lines, most lots have a slope of at least 25%. But you kind of have to go into the data to realize the slopes are even higher than that. And this boundary kind of actually a little bit understates the statistical distribution of how steep many of these lots are. I understand that there are procedures in place that have stood the test of time. You know, you go through this conceptual design. Once you do this, you go through engineering and physical constraints permit, and we're going to do everything according to code. If we go to the next slide, please. You know, I mean, you can do everything according to code and check every single dot in the code, and then nature calls. Because nature has its own way of doing things, and our codes, much as we want, cannot encompass all of nature. This is a development in California, fairly similar. I California codes are even more stringent than ours. Steep slopes of loose soil are basically metastable structures. They kind of sit in an equilibrium just before collapse. And if you disturb them, either hydrologically or different ways, most typically is hydrology, drainage, these slopes are going to give way and reach a new equilibrium, which we call landslide. That's kind of exactly what happened in this development. Next slide. You start doing engineering fill on steep slopes. Again, another subdivision in California, loose soil, actually fairly similar to the soil on Smith Ridge. Over time, slippage plains form at the points where you've connected your fill, and the homes have an incentive to collapse. And this is what happened in that subdivision in particular in Southern California. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is the actual hill. And Mr. Ekman made valid point that one of these pictures is from my property, but it's contiguous. It is the same ridge. In fact, the ridge extends much further to the east. But two of the other pictures are on the developer property. We are just not allowed to get in. You can take pictures from the hospital parking lot that show you a fairly similar picture to this. So what do you see on Smith Hill when you go there, actually? Well, I mean, slippage plains that are pretty much vertical. And the soil, there are different ways to speak about soil, but generally you talk about the soil that crumbles in your hand as you hold it. We go to the next slide. It is true that there is a lot of vegetation on the hill, but during the rainy season, runoff forms, and there are small slippage plains that form on the slope, as you can see in this picture. That can actually be caused by irrigation mishaps. I mean, I had a small irrigation mishap that washed several cubic feet of soil under my own house. If we go to the next slide, these matters are complex, and I'm not a licensed engineer. I'm not a geologist. But there are more recent resources that have looked at this. And we made the reference to Dogami. The state of Oregon, Department of Geology and Mining Industries have actually put a lot of this data online. And if you go and start investigating what is there, I mean, you can see a band that is classified as high landslide susceptibility that cuts right through the loop road, the embankment, and about half the homes that are proposed. And my house is actually on this too, by the way. So I want to attract your attention that there is some information that we probably need to look at. And the next slide gives you a little bit further detail. I mean, this can get very technical, and I'm not necessarily the best person. I have a smattering of knowledge about these matters. But this is the actual Dogami report, certified by a state engineering geologist, date 2023, about Smith Ridge. Smith Ridge itself looks like a hill, but in fact, it's classified as a headscarp. It means that's actually the exposed face of a fault from the previous landslide. And I've taken from a textbook picture what a headscarp is. And you can see it right there. We are proposing to build houses right on the steep edge between the blue and the brown, which RF means, the lines, the point to the RF means that basically that's a fall mechanism of earth movement that is anticipated next by the Dogami report. I'll let you examine all this. The hospital is built on the toe of the landslide. It's a relatively more stable area than the headscarp itself. If we go to the next slide, again, I mean, what we neighbors between the 20 of us, the time we've lived there, we have a couple of hundred man-years of knowledge of our hill. And our observations are entirely consistent with Dogami. The slope is highly unstable. It moves. And seasonal runoff has a pretty big effect on the small scale movements. Now, with regard to what Mr. Ekman mentioned, there may or may not be a layer of soft sandstone underneath, 3 feet underneath. But guess what is going to slip first if there is additional light movement? And besides, this is a 100-foot scarp that already cut through this layer of sandstone during its most recent landslide. It's really not a matter for me, who is not licensed to debate with you. This is really a matter where a professional geologist have to look. But I think we have enough material to warrant further look. I know I heard a lot of you struggle with applicable codes. Towards the end, I want to mention to you that there could be applicable codes and applicable bases to look a little bit deeper into this. But let's talk about traffic a little bit. I don't think we quite accurately discussed what I meant by road safety. This is what it looks like in your car when you're driving up that steep dogleg. And the camera angle is wide, but in fact, there is a car coming about 20 feet from you that you don't see. And actually, the camera exaggerates how far it is. This is really close. You will not be able to stop when you come at this corner. This is at the point, none of the 4 points you saw in the traffic study is this. The traffic, they're far away. This is actually our street. If we go to the next slide, this is coming downhill. Same situation. Every corner of the dogleg has this configuration. One of my neighbors' little granddaughter drives her little pink ladybug Volkswagen just around the corner. You don't see her. You're about 30 feet away when you turn this corner. But this is not the worst. The worst is in the winter. You simply cannot drive there. I mean, I have a 4-wheel drive car with studded tires. It's pretty heavy, and I'm scared out of my wits when I have to drive down the hill. There are just a few of us. We normally stay put during winter weather because we know better. It's simply not safe to come down the hill. Imagine 100 people on top of this that you add to this single access road. It is a difficult situation. I realize there is no easy solution to this actually, but please keep this in mind as you consider your vote. This road is not exactly the best road to confine 100 new residents and their guests to during winter time, maybe during emergency or in general. I mean, it's not a good road. Like I said, I have driven for about 20 years in town. I know no other road that presents these challenges. We have steep roads, but nothing quite like this. And nothing like that confines so many people to these roads. Most our steep roads have an alternative. This road does not. Next slide, please. If you talk about large-scale impacts, if you look at landslides of the magnitude that are reported to Dugami, you can see that the headscarp sits right above the hospital. And if you start thinking this massive earthworks, this 500 linear foot embankment, potentially long-term construction stretching over many years, you start disturbing the hydrology of this ridge. You look at the landslide debris fan that covers a pretty big chunk of the hospital. Now, another thing that we mentioned was the wildfire. The house sprinklers, I think, are a great idea to improve the safety of the neighborhood, but they address things like kitchen fires. Here, you talk about a wildfire on a steep scarp. The prevailing winds in the summer are very strong. They blow exactly along the scarp. Conflagration can start and move pretty fast. We see it actually every year from top of my house. I observe similar events in Dalles Port every July 4th. This will move fast, and this can affect right downstream. You can see the Northern Wasco PUD substation, which is pretty critical to this part of town. And just on the other side is the BPA, transmission lines to California. So you talk about pretty major infrastructure that's in the path of a potential grass fire that could conceivably start in something as trivial as a July 4th party in one of these new houses. It is not practical to do vegetation control on the ridge. You cannot walk on it. If you go walk on this ridge trying to contain the vegetation, the ground will start sliding under your feet. You'll be standing there and you'll be actually coming tap, tap, tap down. Because the soil is pretty soft in the summer when you actually, in spring, when you need to control the vegetation. Next, please. I want to stay focused on the three major safety hazards we identified. But as we neighbors talked about this, there is about a dozen other issues. Just plain land movement that's correlated to the steepness and the nature of the soil that causes foundation cracks and nuisances. If you really look at the engineering plans in detail, I know they're hard to read for most of us, but if you really look, there are going to be some very steep driveways, tow retaining walls. You multiply this by 30, you talk about some pretty serious challenges. People will not use their driveways. They're going to park everything they own on this narrow loop road, and they will leave it there. And how is the fire engine going to navigate through a mass of cars constricting this road, which already is narrower than we think it is? All these details are in the text appeal that we submitted, and they reference applicable criteria to the code, which I think make them relevant. But the one thing I want to come up in the time we have, if we can go to the next slide, just skip over this one and this one too. You mentioned the potential solutions. The idea of our potential solutions is to basically, like Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Why affirm something that I can see gives indigestion to many people and then have to deal with all the possible problems, and then who is going to actually track that over years and years, done by multiple contractors and developers and so forth, and God knows what this is actually going to hold. Why not begin with a good design from the onset? And I'm not saying that's the only good design. That's just an idea. They actually didn't come from me. I talked to one of my old classmates who holds a degree in architecture and urban studies from MIT. I said, look at this. And they said, why don't you build cul-de-sacs? Well, there you go. If you build cul-de-sacs, you don't have to build a loop road. The real problem is the loop road. The loop road, has about 60 feet clearance, actually more. That pushes you all this distance into the slope, onto the scarp. Then you need this massive embankment to hold the homes. Whereas if you go via the cul-de-sac way, you really make a much less aggressive geotechnical development from the onset, and most of these problems disappear. If we go to the next slide, please. East 21st, we didn't propose it as, you guys have to do it, we hold on to it, but it was more of an appeal towards the city. You're going to put 100 people on this hill with inadequate access. That is, we don't think it's safe. In our transportation study planning, we need to think ahead about what's going to happen to this area as more people move in. I realize the grades are steep, but it is virgin land, and that gives you the opportunity to construct a roadway by earthworks that will really cure all the problems that the dogleg has at present. It's something to be considered as part of what could help with a lot of the traffic problems. If we go to the next one, I just want to make everybody appreciate that it's good to have good design from the beginning. We talk about significantly improved landslide hazards by just being less aggressive and not having this massive embankment perched on the very scarp. But there are other benefits from...
Amy, could you stop the clock? You wanted me to warn you when you were...
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mays. No, this is good. I'm actually at the end. This is the last slide. I just want to make a point that there are actually many advantages for the developer. I don't think they've considered them. They have to build a lot less road. I mean, you realize that once, if I can appeal to Jason, if the city council affirms this application, you have to build this 500-foot embankment. I mean, this is a massively costly Corps of Engineer type of work. Who is going to pay for this, really? And by the way, if you go by a redesign, you can still have a pretty dense development that certainly meets the low residential density requirements. If we can go to the last picture, it's just last one. Thank you. I mean, just a reminder of what we talked. You have an important vote ahead of you. The safety of a lot of people depends on the decision you make today. And I'm not saying it's not necessarily as simple as voting as yay or nay. I think in the applicable criteria we quoted, you have room perhaps to adjourn for further consideration. Perhaps you have room, bring redesign. And I just want to ask you to please do the right thing. And thank you for the time.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Valkov or Ms. Danzer? Counselor Richardson.
I'll follow up on your line of questioning, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Valkov, thanks for being here tonight. Have you had a chance? I'm just curious. Not that it's required or anything, but have you had a chance to talk to Mr. Alford?
Well, no. Like I said, I kind of got involved into this about a month ago.
Yeah.
I think last September, we had a community barbecue where we discussed the proposal. Mr. Alford did not attend. It was just about 25 neighbors or so. Pretty much everybody was opposed to the project, but we didn't know why at the time. We actually didn't know much. And then kind of, I mean, I am sorry, I have 3 kids, pretty busy at work, kind of went out of my mind. And I thought that the application had been denied. That's what one of the neighbors told me. And that's all I heard. So short answer, no, I have not. I haven't heard anything.
As I said, I was mostly curious on that.
But now we are paying attention.
Counselor McLaughlin.
I would just like to listen for the other guest. If you have any additional.
Well, I looked at this from more of a planning, engineering point of view. And one of the things that I found was that in the definitions of the city code, there are 2 words there, shall and may. And they are used repeatedly throughout the code, but shall is a mandatory requirement. May is a permissive, as in to the justification of the entity that's reviewing it, whether it be engineering or planning. And one of the things that I found to be very against what the code had required was the minimum radius of the center line, that dog leg that's out in front of the existing homes. What is the justification for keeping that alignment when the code says that it shall be a minimum of 80 feet in the radius of the center line? The other thing is that we shall provide utilities to all of the lots. Well, if you look closely at the plans, it is going up 20 to 30 feet to get the utilities to those homes on the top tier. Not looking at the layout. If you look at it, you can see that there's no no storm sewer that is in the 21st going to the east. Where is all the water from those hills, the top of the houses on the top of the hill? Where is their stormwater going to go? That hasn't been accommodated for. There was discussion as to widening the access road to those. Basically, they become rear view access lots up on the top there. The other thing I said that, connectivity and orderly development are both parts of the code that say, yes, you do need to extend for any future development that is within the urban growth boundary to the far east boundary of any adjacent, that adjacent lot. Yeah, the grades are not acceptable to very, grades would need to be addressed significantly to make a road that goes that way. But again, the justification for not following those parts of the code were something that I had taken a look at. And I guess we also need to kind of look at, there's that statement that says does not substantially conform. And what really creates the situation where what is being given to us now as a preliminary 2D kind of plan that really doesn't address how much of this development is going to impact the slopes. To get utilities up to those lots on the top tier, we're going to have to be running storm water, actual potable water, or sanitary up that steep slope. Well, once you start cutting into the slope, that's when we would see the issues of sliding and movement in the area. There's been nothing in the preliminary plans that have addressed any kind of slope stabilization. The roadway is up against the slope itself, from the 21st Avenue going towards, you know, you're going to have to take some kind of excavation there. And again, any kind of movement in this is going to impact those slopes. Yeah, they've been there for a long time, but that's because the only thing that happens up there is, you know, maybe the deer run up and down. There's not been any kind of disturbance, and there hasn't been any hydrology that has been added to the slope that would cause it to slide and or move. And I think waiting for the physical constraints plan propose this is what we're going to do to stabilize these slopes is kind of putting the cart behind or front of the horse, or however that statement is. You need to analyze that kind of stuff ahead of time and then make logical redesign of your layouts to accommodate more of the physical constraints of the site, because those slopes are constraints. There's no two ways about it. Nowhere are we saying that you should develop up here. What we are saying is that you should develop you should put more thought and due diligence into what you're proposing as development, so that we don't have failure. We don't have, that public roadway of Smith Loop goes through an area that has been identified as landslide factor. Again, I'm not a geologist. I just kind of looked at it from a logical, how are we going to actually put this in, and how are we going to service these lots? We've got lots that have access that are 2-to-1 slopes with no way to put a driveway in. We've got fire turnarounds that are going up slopes that are, again, nothing that the fire department could run a truck up. So these are kinds of things that should have, in my opinion, taken more into consideration before proposing this plan, because there's so much involved in this site that is the 3-dimensional due to the tiered type slopes of site.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Thank you for allowing the additional testimony.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions for the appellant?
I have none.
I have a couple. I was going to allude to attachment 4, which is actually your appeal. I'm not going to read the language because it's been repeated over and over about the weather conditions, the snow and ice.
Yes,
My
sir.
question is, don't you think that people who choose to buy several $100,000 homes up there will understand that those conditions already exist?
I cannot speak to future buyers, but I can tell you how I found out about these conditions was by almost crushing Dr. Patrick Grimsley with my car. He was waving at me. He was cleaning snow from his car, and he was waving at me. And I realized that I cannot stop. And he thinks that I'm waving at him too. I'm actually trying to warn him and screaming from inside the car, Patrick, get out the hell out of the way. I won't repeat exactly what I said. I don't know how the other 100+ residents are going to find out about these conditions, because everybody will have their own experience.
Okay.
But we do find out. Please don't come there when it snows.
My next question alludes to page 169 of the of your appeal. It's actually attachment 4, but you
Mhm.
had the map up, this map.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you get that up there, Amy? Um, this is the third study that has been alluded to tonight. Do you happen to know, this is a USGS, United States Geological Survey map?
Dogami,
This is Dogami?
Oregon Department of Geology and Mining. They have, basically the state geologists have compiled data from many sources. The bulk of it is from LiDAR satellite data. LiDAR can measure the land contour with great precision, inches sometimes. They also have inventory of soils, and so they basically have taken this vast mass of data, compiled it together, have produced the inventory for Northern Wasco County, which is the Dogami 2023 report. And they have an online kind of portal into this data where they kind of do a bit of a projective analysis. Now, like I said, I mean, my geology comes from being passionate collecting fossils as a kid. I can understand some of the words, but I'm not a geologist to speak to. But I think this is fairly disturbing when you see that their assessment of high landslide susceptibility intersects the proposed development, and especially the heavy features of this proposed development, that ought to be a cause for concern. Now, we talk about applicable criteria. I mean, I know that you guys get it. I could see that. I think that we are struggling with what applicable criteria we can bring to bear. So, Joshua, forgive me from playing your game here. That's not my sport. But the City of the Dalles Comprehensive Land Use Plan, low density residential, unless supported by qualified geologists, single family residential homes must not be located in areas of active geologic hazard or on lots with slope exceeding 20%. That's just one. By their virtue, we cannot codify everything in precise language. That's why in writing our laws, we have a preface that states the intent of the law. And actually, I think the Dallas Municipal Code does a really good job at stating the intent of the law, which is to provide for public safety and orderly and responsible development. This is written on so many places throughout the code. With regard to landslide, Chapter 10, 2010 clearly states that every development has to be conducted in a way that protects public safety. We may not have specified language that says, well, this has to be in this study. But the intent of the law is clear. And when you have enough information, we need to start thinking about what is the intent of the law rather than the fine print, because every one of those disaster pictures I showed you, I mean, they followed the law to the letter. You can go and research it yourself. It's very possible to follow. I think all of us know that it's very possible to follow the law to the letter and still violate it.
Okay, my question really was, that caption up there is different than the one was submitted with your
correct
application.
Yes.
Appeal.
Yes.
Yeah.
The latest material you have in hand is, I mean, we have been working frantically to prepare, because a lot of information we actually did not have time.
I get that. I just wanted to make sure we understand that on the page 169, you said USGS/state. In fact, state is Dogami.
It's Dogami, yes. It's actually Pam who ferreted out this information.
Yeah. And I know who Dogami is. I don't know if everybody else does, but and it was a 2023 study, which was not in the original caption.
Correct. Because I was the writer and several of us were the data gatherers and the canvassers for the community. So, we found that an appeal to the city council was possible the night before the deadline. So the document that you have maybe in hand may not be the latest, but we have tried to be a bit more professional in the latest preparation. So these printouts that I emailed to Joshua yesterday and today are the latest update of the information we've compiled in support of our appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission minutes. And again, I'm going to have to, there's page 6. Do you have a copy of that? I'll read it real slow if you don't. You haven't really talked about this, at least much, so I'm wondering how important it is to you. Ms. Danzer also pointed to an easement between lots 29 and 19, stating that this area should be developed as a public street that extends to the eastern property line in order to accommodate future development. Why is that important to you? Or is it important to you?
I was pointing it out mostly as a breach of the actual code. Is it important? Well, it's important for future development that, it's 30, 40, 50 years away. Who knows? But to get to there, you have to have an actual roadway. You don't, what's proposed now is a private easement. It's a private access easement and a public utility way. So if you don't design the road as an East 21st Street to actually go towards the east, which means that you would have to accommodate the actual grading and you would have to cut into that slope so that you could make a road going to the east and access those other areas for future development. I mean, that's part of what the whole urban growth boundary delineates is that, yeah, this area is available for development and it's single family, low density area. Going farther to the south, obviously you've got a different line work there that shows that there's a scenic, there's another kind of designation there that means that future residential development wouldn't be going south into the orchard area.
Right. Okay, so it's not a directly related to your appeal. It's more of a concern about the future.
Well, yeah, but that's part of what the code is based on. And we were looking for specific actions that can be tied directly to the code itself.
Okay, my last question alludes to Mr. Alford's answer to my question about Mr. Valkov suggesting that his additional property is a spearhead for a much more massive development, which will affect public safety. Are you satisfied with his answer to that question, Mr. Valkov?
Yes, and I don't think this is really part of our appeal.
Well, it's in your appeal. I mean,
that could be an old document that has code because remember, we've tried to gather the comments of a couple of dozen people.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's hard to keep track of.
Okay. That's fine.
But it's not part of this appeal where we become better organized. Thank you.
I think if you take into account future planning, future development, the Alfords will not always own that land. At some point, it will move to other ownership. There will be different things going on in the Dalles that may require development of that land. If you don't allow for access for that, then you have essentially cut that off as a potential.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Last call, at least you'll get a chance to respond later. Certainly the applicant will be allowed to respond to your comments as well. But in the meantime, now we're going to move to public comments. Does anyone here wish to testify in favor of the appeal? In other words, those in favor of the appeal and who think the subdivision's application should be denied. If so, up to 3 minutes per speaker is allowed. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Please raise your hand if you would like to comment first. No, okay. Please introduce yourself and your address, and you have up to 3 minutes. Can you see the clock? Can you
2017 View Court.
see the clock okay?
I sure can.
Okay.
Does your decision have to be made this evening? Pro or con on this thing?
We do have a May 20th deadline, but I'd like to have the attorney answer that question more directly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as the Community Development Director mentioned a few times, and it's indicated in the staff report, this application, due to the number of extensions that went into the review process, is running up right against the deadline. May 20th is the day of the city's final decision. I think also the planning director mentioned earlier that if a decision isn't made here tonight, the council would need to convene a special meeting before the 20th to render the city's final decision. Is that helpful?
The only reason I ask that is I hope everybody's been there because on site, physical site, because the plan looks wonderful on paper. And Joshua, I have a question. So I talked to you about this quite some time ago, and you said that planning had approved the site plan. Is that right? The site plan?
Yeah, the tentative plan
Yeah.
was approved.
So vocabulary lesson for me. So did that mean you approved the lots also, or is the site just that whole area that, yes, it's okay to build something there?
No, it hasn't received any kind of approval to start building anything. We've approved the outline of it, everything that's included in the 9-acre outline, that's been approved tentatively, and then it was appealed to Planning Commission.
Okay. I jumped into you approved where the lots were and everything. And I think that you get the idea that our main concern is that hillside. And if you go look at it, or if you have looked at it, you can see that a lot of those lots are going over that hillside. And I don't know any of us who, if I owned that property, I'd want to sell it and have people develop it. I don't know of any of us who are totally against that. We just are concerned not only for our own homes that are on Claudia Lane, right below that, or the water runoff from that and all of that, but also for the people who develop up there. And was this property within city limits when the geological hazard rules or whatever were studied? 15 seconds.
You're talking about the 2010 study?
Yeah, I guess.
We would have to check. Yeah, but the study did the entire urban growth boundary, so even exceeding past city limits.
Well, I'm just curious if that was.
You're out.
I'm just curious if that was in the county rather than the city. See what I mean? If that was part of
So
within city limits.
It's in the urban growth boundary. So the big difference between urban growth boundary and the city limits, on the land use side of things, we don't really look at city limits as much as the city does with city licensing and things like that. The city of the Dalles Community Development Department has jurisdiction over the entire urban growth boundary. So the study was done for the entire urban growth boundary, no matter if the property was inside or outside of city limits.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
It's all right. I think you made it to the 3 minutes when you consider Mr. Chandler took up some of your time answering your questions. For the record, I was at the site on Saturday morning and walked extensively over the entire property. Okay, anybody else? Yes, ma'am, come forward.
Hi, my name is Allison Schock, and I'm at 2008 View Court. I support our list of concerns in this report. I just want you to consider this. If this was your neighborhood, how would you feel about this if you and your family lived below this development and hearing all the concerns we brought up that were pointed out about safety, not feeling secure that your home and family are safe before the construction even started, and having to go through 5 years of construction process or more with one road in, water drainage issues, soil stability, cracks possibly from hillside movement of our houses, landslide, and numerous other possibilities. We live in this neighborhood and we are concerned about the integrity of the neighborhood. I am pleading with you as a board to help us keep our properties, our families safe by reworking the plans and having a geological test done. So.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Gary Wade. I live at 1700 East 21st. It's the orchard above the property. The easement road that they talk about that goes up on the on the top south side of the development is our easement road up there. I know that road well. It very steep. It erodes every time it rains. And it ends up in a lot of the lots that they're proposing to develop. And it's right now the designer of the subdivision decided that it's right. There's not adequate drainage on there as part of the plan because there's no curbs. There's no way to collect the runoff from the houses or the roads. And I really think that needs to be redesigned or reconsidered. They talked about putting a valley in the road, but where does all the water from the houses that are on the north side of that road go? It's a problem as I see it. There's one other consideration I'm getting old. Oh, there were two lots. There were two lots that were sold, and houses built adjacent to this property in 2019, as they referred to, that were built and do not meet city standards in any way, shape, or form. They don't meet setbacks or anything else. It was some kind of infill thing that they had, the department said they had to allow. But how does that, how do we have faith as a community? They told us at the time that they'd put roads in and they'd have everything set up. And then they went ahead and built them without it. And this is part of the city code now. That's the planning director. And I just want to make sure that that kind of thing isn't going to occur up here additionally, because it's caused a lot of problems in the entire community. So.
Okay, your first question, I'm going to allow Mr. Alford when he gets back up here to answer that question regarding that's the road to the south of the development, right?
Correct.
It goes kind of in a southeasterly direction.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It goes up along the orchard.
Okay, the second question, the two houses, I have no idea where that is. Is that on the east side of?
It's on Smith Loop Road or whatever they call it. They're the furthest east. There's two houses there that were built in 2019 that they referred to, or 20. That didn't include curb, sidewalk, street, anything.
Okay.
And they were permitted despite a lot of people coming in and saying that wasn't appropriate.
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Chandler to answer that question and also point out he wasn't community development director then, but go ahead then.
Yeah, I think I can answer both. We addressed both of these concerns at the planning commission meeting. We added a condition between the initial application review and this new, there is a new condition that was added. And that is that we specifically address that the easement road be designed to collect stormwater, and it will be in a valley shape as described here. That will be piped to the main in the storm system being built in the subdivision. So we discussed that at that meeting. We also talked about those two developments. The city right now, I can lay it out for you how land divisions work, and we're talking about minor partitions and subdivisions. Minor partitions, those are the creation of 3 parcels or less. With a subdivision, it's 4 lots or more. The city is actually restricted from requiring improvements with minor partitions. So what we see happening is we see minor partitions happening all the time in the Dalles, single family homes being built on them. The city cannot require sidewalks or improvements to go on. I sure wish we could. I've tried, but we cannot require that. So to the point of there are no improvements going up to those 2 houses, that is 100% spot on because we can't require them.
Is that a state requirement?
It's a Dalles Municipal Code requirement. Yep.
Is that something we might be able to fix in the future? I know that.
Oh, I would hope so.
Okay.
Just one quick comment on the drainage off of that. I know that area pretty well. I used to build houses anyway. A V road, are you going to take all the water from the houses as well as the impervious surfaces and run it down that? Because those are on, as they said, a 1-to-1 slope there on the backside. And if you have that hydrology there, you're going to be causing a lot of problems. It's got to go to the street. So.
Yeah, and it's a question. I think on that one, I definitely will have the applicant answer the details of those houses. I do know that every house is going to be stubbed. It's going to have a stormwater stub to it. So technically the houses will be built to be able to pipe straight into the storm system, but I'll have the applicants answer that question for you specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Last call. Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to the appeal that would like to testify or ask? I'm sorry, wait a minute. Does anybody wish to testify in opposition to the appeal? Those against the appeal and who think the subdivision application should be approved? If so, up to 3 minutes per speaker is allowed. Please state your name and address for the record if you would like to speak. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the appeal? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Mary Hanlon, and I actually just came here to be at the city council meeting. I don't know the applicant, and I didn't know about this project before today. But I would just like to say that the Dalles has an extremely severe housing crisis, and every housing project that I've been made aware of is fought. People fight it, and there are many reasons, and one went all the way to Luba and lost. And a balanced community has housing that keeps up with the population growth. I've done a ton of studies on the Dalles, and 1,200, the Dalles is losing population. It's not keeping up with growth as well. So we've got, there are 1.7% occupancy rate, vacancy rate in the Dalles, and there were 35% of the 35% growth from 20 to 25, I think, till 23, and at 15% housing growth. 1,200 people between the period of 2019 and 2021 moved out of the town and are commuting in instead of living here. 55% of all the housing in the Dalles is over 55 years old. The Dalles is growing faster than 68% of similarly sized cities. And it is not keeping up with housing. The impact that's had on the housing prices has gone from 2016, the average housing price was $180,000. And in 2024, the peak was 530. And during that period, only 8 housing units were added to the Dalles housing supply. There's a thing called the Metro Monitor, and they look at what balanced cities and towns have, and they have housing that keeps up with the population growth. And the Dalles does not, and it's a really negative trajectory if you don't keep up in a balanced, thoughtful way. Sounds like this group, it was nice to have it be a very civilized conversation, and it sounds like they want to make sure that the geotech is thoroughly reviewed. But there's, opposition for many, many reasons to many, many things. And you can't just change the rules. It's very expensive and difficult to build housing and very time consuming. And the Dalles should welcome it where it can, not fight it. I don't want that alarm going off.
Ms. Hanlon, could you give us your mailing address for the record?
My mailing address is 101 West 2nd Street, 2049.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak in opposition to the appeal? Okay. Does anyone wish to testify or ask questions on this matter not in favor or not in opposition? If so, 3 minutes will be allowed per speaker. If so, please state your name and address for the record if you'd like to speak. Anybody? Anybody want to speak not in favor or not in opposition or to ask any questions? Okay. Does the,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Mr. Counselor Richardson,
this might be a good time for a 5-minute stretch break.
how about 10?
But
Any objections?
I have no objection. No.
Okay, we will reconvene at, let's make it 8:05. Okay, we're back in session here. The next step in this process is the appellant presenting any rebuttal. Does the appellant wish to present any rebuttal? If so, up to 10 minutes will be allowed. Does the appellant have anything they'd like to?
Yes.
You are the appellant.
I don't think we need 10 minutes. And I really don't think we need to rebut what was said because to a large extent, our appeal itself, which we presented is a rebuttal enough. And it's not so much a rebuttal. We're really asking for the right decision to be made and to address the safety and nuisance aspects of this development by redesign. I don't think that's something that is a rebuttal by itself. It's just an appeal to do the right thing. There are two things I would like to point out that we probably didn't have time to go through in the presentation. The first one is actually the sheer mass of problems that you find once you start digging in. When I made a point to Mr. Chandler that we just needed more time to be able to properly respond to this, as basically I think is the fundamental right of the residents. We just said we don't have time with the available time, which was a month, less than a month in my case. Just didn't have time to go sit down and study which applicable criteria are applicable here. And we've done a little bit better job. The latest document for every objection, I think we list applicable criteria. At the end of the day, attorneys probably will argue which is really applicable and which is not. But now we have a reference to applicable codes for every problem that we see. And there are a lot of problems. And I think the more we dig, the more problems we're going to see because we just got started. Give you an example. The lady, I apologize, I forget your name, that made a point about housing. One of the points we make is this development is really not going to do anything about the housing shortage in town. In fact, it's going to make it worse because the people who need homes in the Dalles are teachers, firefighters, and so forth. I mean, they're not millionaire refugees from California and Seattle that really need affordable housing in the Dalles. It's the working people of town. These homes are not homes for working people. In fact, they displace homes for working people because, I mean, I work with contractors a lot in town, and I think that we have another constraint with regard to affordable housing besides land, and this is construction ability. Virtually every contractor you talk to, they are booked sometimes years in advance. We just don't have the bandwidth to build homes to meet the demand with our local resources. Why? Because everybody is building expensive homes. And you put another 30 homes for millionaires on the market. Well, guess who is going to lose housing as a result of that? The people who actually want to build high density affordable housing or medium density affordable housing. And this is just one of the problems. In the latest document, we have started to properly document this with regard to applicable codes. I just want to remind you that the decision tonight is yay or nay, but it could be, let's take the time to do the right thing. Maybe perhaps you adjourn. I don't know the procedural way in which we can do the right thing. But remember, if you vote to affirm the subdivision, this layout and all the problems we raised, they become baked in perpetuity into the neighborhood, barring some major event like a sinkhole opening, like Jason said. So please consider to what extent an affirmative vote is final to a large extent in this map. That's all I wanted to bring up as part of our appeal.
Thank you. We're going to call the applicant up and then you will be able to respond to what he says. You'll have up to 5 minutes, but the applicant by law gets the last word. So thank you very much. Does the applicant wish to present any rebuttal? If so, up to 10 minutes is allowed.
No.
as Mr. Belkoff stated, I don't necessarily know if it's a strong rebuttal or not. There was a few comments that were made during the
Speak in the microphone.
appellant's testimony. One of them has, one of the big concerns appears to be this embankment built on the north edge of Smith Loop. And people need to recognize that I believe, as it actually states, it says fill may be placed there. It's not a given. It's not a for sure thing. There's actually a bench created about 25 to 30 feet wide between the north edge of Smith Loop right of way and the top of the slope. With the city's or their ordinance that allows for a reduction in setbacks based upon steep sloping lots, the front setback can be reduced from 15 feet down to 10 feet, and the garage can go from 20 feet down to 5 feet, along with the corresponding change or reduction in the allowable height. But this allows for, if this exception was taken, it would allow for the homes to sit closer to the road, extend less out over the bank, and possibly not require any embankment. There was a question about no parking on the roadway, and actually the city streets, there's 32 feet width of pavement. It actually allows for 2 8-foot wide parking lanes and a 16-foot wide travel lane for both directions. I call it lane, but in both ways. The installation of roads and homes and manicured or yards, maintained yards, actually reduces the fire risk by reducing some of the fuels that are out there right now with the tall grasses that currently exist on the site. Should point out, I do not believe that the city requires storm runoff from homes to be collected and conveyed into the city storm system. Simply the roadways and such. Oftentimes, stormwater from residences is kept on site and actually, in a smart manner allowed to infiltrate or be used for rain gardens, watering of other vegetation, and other methods. So just recognize that, like I say, that the city, I do not believe, requires storm water from roofs to be captured. Mr. Wade's the orchardist, pointed out that, right now when he's exiting or entering his property through the roadway, that it tends to erode and cause a lot of gravel to run off onto the neighbors' properties and such. And I just want to make it clear that the new roadway is going to be 26 feet of wide and paved. So there's no longer a condition where gravel can be going on to neighbors' properties with him exiting and entering. It was also designed with radiuses that would allow for a semi truck and a 43-foot trailer behind it to enter and exit. We understand the needs of orchardists and took that into account during the design of that roadway. The stormwater will be captured likely in an inverted section of roadway in catch basins that are then piped to the city storm main that would be down in East 21st Street. As far as the existing lots go that were developed under the minor partition process, obviously Mr. Alford's actually going to be paying the piper on those improvements now. He'll be paying for sidewalk, curb, and pavement in front of, along 2 sides of one of those homes and 1 side of the other, along with the frontage across Mr. Balkoff's house and Mr. Alford's parents' house. The last thing that I just wanted to touch on was the idea that these were going to be millionaire type homes and stuff. And obviously they're going to be one-offs. This isn't a flat piece of ground where you just stick, 2,000 square foot ranch style tract homes on every lot. And you have A, B, or C pattern, and you can choose from that. They are going to be somewhat customized just to fit the topography and the views and such that are afforded up here. If you look at the houses that exist within the development, they all are like that. that they're built to take advantage of the views and to fit the sites that they are on. None of them are the same. None of them look the same. They're all unique to the piece of property. While that might tend to indicate a higher price point, maybe those people that are buying those lots are currently living in an existing $300,000 house within the city, but there's no $500,000 or $600,000 house available. When these lots become available, they move up, and then those empty homes can now be backfilled with the working class. And I shouldn't say working class, I'm sorry. The people that Mr. Balkoff was speaking of, the firemen, the teachers, the maybe what we would call
class.
blue collar working class, yes.
People at work.
I don't have much more to say. I just hope that you let me build. Or let me get to the next step.
Okay, thank you. The appellant now gets 5 minutes if they want to respond, and then you'll have the last word if you choose to take it. Would the appellant like to come forward and for up to 5 minutes and present a closing statement? Up to 5 minutes is allowed.
30 seconds, Mr. Mayor, esteemed councilors. I know it's late. Thank you for your time. We've put a lot of paper in front of you. Actually, my last appeal is to Jason himself as a guy who does business. Jason, just give me a reason to buy one of these lots, because right now I won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ekman or Mr. Alfred, you can get up to 5 minutes to closing statement if you choose. Do you decline? That's okay, right? Okay. Do the counselors have any specific questions of the appellant or the applicant before I close the public hearing and open it up for council deliberations? Any questions from the council at this point? Okay. The public hearing is now closed. And we'll now proceed with city council deliberations. I'd like to start on my right with Councilor McLaughlin. Do you have anything you'd like to say or deliberate on?
Not until we take a final vote.
Okay, Councilor Ring.
Not at this time.
Councilor Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a few questions for staff and our fire marshal. I believe is here.
Yeah, he's right there.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for being here this evening.
Let's see. This is Chris Grant, Mid-Columbia Fire Rescue, 1400 West 8th Street, in the Dalles.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Do you have concerns about accessing, serving, or I guess turning around, exiting the development as proposed?
Well, the fire department gets involved in the early phases with access and water supply. So provisions were made prior to me coming to the Dalles that required the impact of fire sprinklers in each of the residential structures due to the grade of the road being greater than 10%, which the fire code calls for. So that is the code. Those were the agreements that were put in place. The way the layout is with the turnarounds in each phase are all based on the fire code. And those agreements, again, that were made with the site team discussions early on. I've been on the site. There's a lot of room up there, but our concern obviously is for residents' safety. And that's where the fire sprinklers, which are not mandatory. I'm not going to give you my opinion on them, but they do save lives. And if any development takes place up there, that's going to be a requirement just due to the grade of the road.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Oh, that's fine.
I have a couple of questions probably for our Public Works Director.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Dale. Do you feel that you could successfully connect stormwater, drinking water, and such utilities to the area, even though it's sort of perched and elevated? Can we serve that with our utilities?
Yeah, we can.
Does the Dogami map give you any pause or concern as an engineer? Do you feel like that's something we need to be taking into consideration?
You know which
Well-
map he's referring to?
Yeah.
Mhm.
We typically, I mean, like back in, we have the map that was done and the study that was done within the urban growth boundary by Mark Ginger back in 2010 that evaluated everything within the urban growth boundary in the city of the Dalles, and that's what we have been adhering to and following over the years.
Correct, but there's at least some indication from the state that, you know, there may be areas that are subject under some circumstances to sliding or slope failure. Sorry to put you on the spot, but so it goes. Do you feel that it would be fruitful for staff to consider that, or to be directed to consider that during the physical constraints process?
Well, through the physical constraints process, you know, if there's over 250 cubic yards of material that's being disturbed, then it's requiring an engineered study and plan to be prepared by the applicant, by the developer. So the applicant or the developer, their team would be requiring the engineered plans to look at and study the site and the amount of cuts in the fills that are being generated for that development.
And city engineers have to review that and
And
make sure
city
that it follows.
Correct. Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is what appears to me at least to be an open question that exists perhaps beyond our legal authority to compel. But I'm wondering if they're at this stage, if I understand the legal counsel properly, I'm wondering if there's a way to get at that at a next stage where we either require or take on ourselves some sort of geotech examination.
I mean, if we're directed to study one or, you know, have one that's prepared for by the city, you know, any information that's going to come out of that would be any recommendations for site-specific recommendations would be what we would have to basically look at and adhere to from that study. But we don't have anything that's in our mechanism or in place to require one with this development.
Right. Thank you. That's what I think I have for questions tonight for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does the city council have any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, I do have one question that
Councilor Ring?
Thanks. I didn't get the answer to this, but I wrote it down. During development, and actually even prior to development, there'll be conditions for making sure that from a civil engineering perspective that the site's prepared properly and it adheres to some of the mitigations and whatnot that are the conditions that are already in the application, when they start digging, essentially, right? If they discover that there is something there that wasn't accounted for because nobody knew, right? Sort of like when we dig downtown and there's archaeological things that might pop up. What's the process? What's the process in which that would be addressed if there was something that, you just can't plan for? Does it make sense?
I mean, throughout the process, this development process, we're going to have frequent site visits from our development inspector. So I assume when something like that comes up, they'll have the information for everybody involved that they need to call through a pre-construction meeting. I think we would have to mitigate those uncertainties when they come up, depending on what it is. Archaeological is a little easier because we know exactly what we're supposed to do. But something, yeah. I don't know. Do you guys have anything in place?
Well, again, like the engineering firm that the applicant's hiring, I would believe that they're going out and doing site investigations and stuff, and preparing for what the road's going to be, and the cuts and the fills that are going to be generated for those, and the layout of the properties and everything. So, I would anticipate that they've done their due diligence of what's going to be required to get this subdivision up off of the ground and getting it built, and how they're providing the information and laying out the engineered plans that they're submitting for the final submittal for getting approved for construction. And we'll be taking a look at that and working with them through that process. And there's a lot of times that they submit things or they have questions and we talk back and forth, and then they go and do their research and due diligence and prepare plans and submit those, based on their findings.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just want to jump in. I mentioned it earlier on in the meeting, but it is a little bit unrelated to the decision before the council tonight connected with the approval of the subdivision. But I just wanted to be extra clear because it seems like there's a tremendous amount of public concern about it, and councilors are also asking about it too. And it seems generally there seems to be this question as to whether the city can request specific geotechnical plans in certain circumstances for developments that may be subject to higher scrutiny than, let's say, a flat lot down by the water, right? And I think it's really sensible. Whether it has anything to do with a subdivision application, it doesn't. However, just to sort of assuage the public's concerns as well as council's, and this is all part of our code currently, under 10.8/2050, which is, and 10.8 is the portion of our land use and development code that addresses physical constraint permits. There's a section called required plans, which is the list of things that a developer who needs a physical constraints permit must submit to the city in order for the city to review that application to determine whether the site is meeting all of these identified, whether the site is mitigating all identified hazards. There's a site plan that clearly shows a bunch of things, and they're all listed there. There's no less than 15 separate requirements for this site plan. And I'll just read you a couple of them and then the next part of this. So in addition to the location and the use of all proposed and existing buildings within the proposed development, and the location and size of all public utilities, the location of all the drainage ways or public utility easements, a topographic map of the site at a contour interval of 5 feet or less, showing existing and proposed ground contours, the locations of all existing natural features, including trees of certain calipers, rocks, natural drainage and creeks on the site, faults, any contemplated modifications to any of those natural features, the proposed method of erosion control, water runoff control, and tree protection for the development, building envelopes for all existing and proposed new parcels, So these are, again, part of the 15 things that are required for the site plan that's required for a physical constraints permit. But then there's this other provision in that same section called additional plans and studies. And it authorizes the community development director to require additional plans and studies necessary to evaluate the application. And so if it becomes clear after reviewing the site plan that's required to be submitted for a development application for a proposed project that requires a physical constraints permit, if it becomes clear to the director that, hey, it looks like there might be something here that might impact the public safety, or we need to be concerned about landslides or other types of natural disasters connected with topography or soil composition or what have you, that's related to all of this. The code contemplates the city can, of course, require an additional study to confirm or dispel those, ideas. And so I didn't want there to be this perception that the city's code or really Oregon law has overlooked the idea that, hey, some land is hard to build on. Of course it is. But I tried to mention this earlier, but I didn't want to confuse the issue before the decision maker, you all here tonight, because again, I'm not going to say that this has nothing to do with a subdivision. It really doesn't have anything to do with a subdivision, but it has a lot to do with this subdivision, right? In the future for this community. It shouldn't be a basis for your decision making here tonight. Again, all of that would be handled through the physical constraints permit, which is a separate application. But just if it's helpful for you all to think about, the code doesn't completely abandon any of these ideas. It just calls for it at a different time in the process. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you. I think that gets to the point that I was wanting to get to, is that once this, if it's subdivision like this moves forward, there is going to be additional reviews. It's not like one and done and a developer gets to go and just dig and build things. There's, just like any good project plan, there are milestones along the way to allow for those check marks, if you will, to make sure that things are moving in a safe, productive, and proper manner.
Well put. Any other deliberations? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Is there language somewhere that?
Yeah, page 61 of your packet. 61 and 62 of your packet.
$61. You have it?
I've got it.
Let me read it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 25-021A. Resolution denying the appeal and affirming the approval of subdivision application number 86-24 as set forth in Planning Commission Resolution number PC 627A-25, based upon the evidence in the record and the findings and conclusions set forth in the agenda staff report dated May 12th, 2025, including the conditions of approval.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Ring and seconded by Councilor Richardson to deny the appeal and move forward with the applicant's plan. Is there any last minute discussion?
Maybe a statement that I believe that I have reviewed sufficient documentation, 327 pages, and testimony presented this evening. I do believe I can make an unbiased and sound decision related to this appeal.
Anybody else?
I will echo what Councilor McLaughlin said. Have read the record and thought about it quite a bit, and I guess I want to be clear. I feel pretty strongly that the neighbors there raised some valid concerns about potential impacts of the subdivision uphill, and I would share some of those if I lived there. I do live in a neighborhood that has a steep access that sometimes hinders us in the wintertime. So I do have some understanding. I have lived in the Dalles a long time and walked that neighborhood. So I do understand your concerns in a very sort of real and on the ground way. But it's also pretty clear that we don't really have legal ground or authority to deny, in my opinion, to deny the subdivision that's gone through our current codes and process. That said, as Mr. Velkov stated, there may be some ways to address some of the concerns. You've heard our city attorney, some other folks discuss the physical constraint permit and the additional studies that may be necessary to evaluate the application, including perhaps a geotech study. So that may not necessarily put all your concerns to rest, but I do hope you understand that we don't have blanket authority. We have a process we have to operate within. Otherwise, we get into legal hazard or get our city into legal hazard very quickly.
Yeah.
Councilor Ring.
I'd like to echo both my other counselors' comments tonight, but I'd also like to make sure that everybody understands that, again, there are pathways to ensuring, that this project and others will continue to go forward in a safe manner. I'm pretty confident in our city staff's ability to assess and evaluate along the way. I know I too share similar concerns. I've lived in the Dalles for a very long time, but I've also lived in some of the areas that were brought up by Mr. Valco in California. And I've seen the impacts of, Mother Nature and time causing things, and you can only plan for so much, that's for sure. But I'm glad that I'm happy that we were able to have a wonderful conversation this evening. And I hope that moving forward, I would hope that all parties, the folks in the neighborhood and developers would continue to discuss and collaborate along the way and share the information that they all have and continue on.
I'd like to say just before we vote here that I appreciate the appellant who is very prepared and articulate and professional in making their arguments, and the way you conducted yourselves is very much appreciated by this chair. So with that, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 3-0. Thank you all very much. Okay. The City Council of the City of the Dalles will now meet in exec.
No,
We pulled the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a discussed consent agenda item, which was item D. E is an elephant, a resolution concurring with my appointment of Steve Light to the Plan Commission. Did you want to say anything, Councilor Richardson? Or
sure. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Did I feel bad? I don't know if I felt bad.
I said, do you feel better?
Oh, did I feel? I didn't feel bad.
I think I was worried. I
Oh.
was a little worried, but it's really on better.
Sure. Shall we?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I would just like to have discussion and just vote on the record in a sort of maximal transparency to have Mr. Light appointed to the Planning Commission. I've had opportunity to work with him on the Federal Street Plaza Committee, and I think he'll be an excellent get or addition for the Planning Commission. But I also have a question for my fellow counselors. And again, I think it just behooves us to be as both actually above board and to be seen as being above board. And that is
Someone get the door.
He's good.
I'm finding it difficult to hear.
so.
Go ahead.
So we're a small town and lots of people know each other and cross paths in various ways. And there's a tool for when elected officials find themselves too close to an issue, elected or appointed, which is recusal. We step down. We have most of us have done that from time to time, or many of us anyway. And I guess my question is, given that Steve, you have an employee or a recent employee on the Planning Commission, do we all feel that recusal is sort of an effective enough tool were there to be a conflict of interest at the Planning Commission? I do. But I do, again, I do think there's value in addressing any potential issues of optics or perception. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. And just being very clear. Yes, there's a tool to be picked up if necessary, and I'm confident in its use. That is the recusal process.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I know you're not even asking me, Dan. I'm just curious. Okay. I might have some thoughts that I think about, and maybe I'll share them depending on what they are. But what you say recusal is a tool. If I understand you correctly, the concern would be that the potential nominee here to the Planning Commission owns a company who has an employee who is also already on the Planning Commission. Yeah. So can you, I guess in my mind, recusal is when an elected or public official is presented with a conflict of interest. I guess I'm not so sure when a recusal are you suggesting that one or both of them would recuse themselves from a decision and for every decision?
Not at all. If there was to be something that affected one or the other, that there was just be, I have confidence that they would use that and not have a sort of a faction of interest on the Planning Commission.
Okay. I think maybe I understand, but I don't need to understand, I guess.
If I
leave that for my counselors to think about.
I don't understand.
If I may, so I think the concern here is that if a small business owner has themselves and one of their employees on the Planning Commission in this case, and there's a development that requires a decision to be made for a variance or something like that that would go before the Planning Commission. I think Councilor Richardson, you're saying that in that case, or any case that may or may not, that may benefit them in some way or somehow, that they could recuse themselves from the discussion and vote.
Just like any other
yeah.
appointed or elected officials. And also, I don't know, maybe it's worth just asking Steve straight out, Mr. Light, if he feels that he can separate employment from discussions at the planning commission such that he and his employees can have their own views and own opinions.
Right. I think that's one of the things that we're certainly have gone through some of our heads, but I think the other concern centers more around the ability for, two members of the planning commission that would be potentially around themselves quite a bit during the work week, right? And making sure that we want to make sure that there's, that all of us are above bar. So certainly if any of us had that sort of conflict where we had an employee that was on a similar board or something like that, we would want to make sure that that was addressed or identified upfront as a potential conflict so it could be mitigated, right? Because we certainly don't want to put any of them in a situation where it would be compromising for them as an individual on a board. But and I think specifically I'm talking about things like discussing meeting or agenda items prior to that deliberation taking place, if you will. Does it make sense? I'm curious if there's any more guidance or
Sure.
yeah.
I happen to be I think the city's ethicist, which is a strange title, but it's something that exists on Oregon public ethics law. Just, spitballing here. I haven't heard anything that would make me think of a conflict of interest. I also don't think that there's actually any issues with two planning commissioners, regardless of where they worked or who they were, having conversation about planning issues. We don't have a 3-member planning commission. Like it's different for county commissioners, right? There's only 3 of them, so 2 of them can't ever talk to each other. But the issues of quorum and serial meetings and things like that tend to come up when there's a small governing body. But with how many was it 7 at the planning commission currently, right? It's you'd need 4 of them to do that, and so to implicate those kinds of issues generally. Obviously, serial communications, those can be triggered, one after the other sequentially, and that can happen, but that could happen with people that don't work in the same place either. And let's just use Freebridge as an example. And Commissioner Grant is an employee, I understand, of Freebridge, right? So if a development application came before the Planning Commission or something came before the Planning Commission that implicated Freebridge, well, Commissioner Grant could be faced, right, with a potential conflict or an actual conflict of interest, right? Because it impacts a business with which he is associated. But the same thing would be true for Mr. Light if he was on the Planning Commission, and they would both be subject to the same ethical rules, but it would all be done sort of transparently.
I feel like I did not fully or carefully articulate what I'd hoped to do by taking it off the consent agenda, which is not so much shedding daylight on our planning commission as on us. The planning, it's easy to put items on the consent agenda for our meetings and have little discussion and just let them go through. I feel like it was most useful for us as a council just to separately discuss and support this.
So the issue before us is we pulled it from the consent agenda.
Yeah.
So it's a separate item.
Right.
So what we have to do is make a decision to approve mayor's appointment of this person onto the planning. So that seems like a simple up and down.
Yes.
If we have a concern that this person has violated or any question whether or not in the future they may have a situation where they have to recuse them, that's on that's at their point in time.
Right. Correct.
And really doesn't concern us. So I'm ready to make a motion.
Well, before you do, I just want to comment. It was my idea to appoint Steve Light to the Planning Commission. I think he would be a tremendous asset. I've seen him working before and other aspects of not only with Freebridge, but with the Federal Street Plaza Committee. I just think he'd be a wonderful asset. I did not know that John Grant worked for Steve Light when I asked Steve to serve. But having said that, I think we can go ahead and approve it tonight if we want. We can make a motion not to approve it, or I would still like to get maybe an opinion from the Ethics Commission, although some recent events with the Ethics Commission make me regret even asking them anything. But I would certainly entertain a motion to go ahead and approve Mr. Light, if that's where you're going with this.
Yes, I am. And I accept your reasoning, and I move to accept your nomination for Planning Commission with Mr. Light.
Is there a second?
I would be very pleased to second.
More discussion?
No.
One comment that this is resolution number 25-019.
Oh,
You referenced.
yeah, for the record.
Okay, it's been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Richardson to approve the resolution appointing Mr. Steve Light to the Plan Commission. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for serving.
The fact that you're still here speaks.
Yes, I think the fact that you're still here qualifies you for being a member of the Plan Commission. Okay. Ready to move on here? The City Council of the City of the Dalles will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602F, which allows the council to meet in executive session to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No final decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session in this room and welcome the audience back into the room. We expect to return to open session in about 2 minutes. 15 minutes.